Are we on? Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our City Council work session. Today is Monday, May 22nd, 2023. It's approximately 1 p.m. If you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we have a special treat before we do the Pets of the Week and Jobs of the Week. So if you all want to make your way forward. So there's an organization called NDI, or National Dance Institute, based primarily out of Albuquerque, but they do serve several cities throughout the, they're going to come down? Okay. Several cities throughout the state. They're a nonprofit organization serving over 7,800 students in 32 communities this year. NDI uses dance and music to teach tenacity and discipline through joyful and rigorous dance classes within the public schools. They've returned to Las Cruces after many years, and we're looking forward to them growing the program here in the future. So without any further ado, I'll let you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Hello, everybody. My name is Ali Sanchez, and I'm an instructor with NDI in New Mexico. I'd like to introduce our accompanist on the keyboard today. This is Mr. Steve Figueroa. You give him a little wave. As a native Las Cruces and graduate of New Mexico State University, I am so honored and excited to be back here presenting today because we have the intention of deepening our roots here in this community and growing our program in Las Cruces where I'm from. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the most important part of the show. Hit it, Steve! Are going to present. If you would like to come to their performance on Thursday, you're all welcome. It's going to be at 6 p.m. And we're going to show you what it's like to be in an NDI class. The first thing we're going to show you is how we warm up. Dancers, are you ready? Audience, watch this. Wow, amazing. Hiya! Hiya! This is called I Go First. It's how we warm up our voices, our bodies, and our brains. Whatever I say, they have to say it really loud. Whatever I do, they have to do it even bigger. Are you guys ready? I go first and then you go. Bend your knees, stretch your knees. Oh yeah. Bend and stretch, bend and stretch. Shake it high, shake it low. Shake it top, to the right, to the left. March with high knees. Say go down, go down, go down, go down. Right hand, punch it down. Left hand, punch it down. Punch it down, punch it down. Punch it all the way around. Punch it all the way around. Stop, stop, let it go. Let it go. Rock, rock, rock. call. You heard our message. It's called the Core 4. It's a chant that we teach dancers work hard to do their best, to never give up, and to be healthy. This is a message that we want them to carry over into all aspects of their lives, whether it's in NDI, in their classroom, if they play on a sports team, and even later on when they're applying for their very first job. We believe it teaches them discipline and hard work and tenacity, and it'll help them accomplish any goal that they have. The next thing we're going to show you is how we teach a dance in NDI. 8 is the magic number, and we teach it in sections we call chapters. Since we're telling a story with our body, we start with chapter 1. It's called the Zia Shakes. Dancers, are you ready? Mm-hmm. Hey-ya! Hey-ya! Okay, I go first, and then you go. Say, shake up high. Shake up high. Then shake it down low. Go. Shake it down low. Good job. Shake it high, shake it low. Shake it high, shake it low. To the right, to the left. To the right, to the left. Super high, super low. Super high, super low. Stretch and stretch. Stretch and stretch. And now, let's count it. I go first for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, go. 5, 6, 7, 8. 5, 6, 7, 8. Are you still smiling? Okay, good. Hey-ya! I go first for 8 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You got it? Okay, audience, what we're going to show you is how we test them to make sure they can do it all by themselves. And then it has a lot of energy. Are you guys ready? Yeah. Yeah. Here's your first test. For that chapter, I want to see if everybody can freeze just only on count 1. If one person misses it, we got to take 2 and try again. What count do you freeze on? 1. Hiya. Hiya. 1. 5, 6, 7, 8. 1. Woo! Nice and crispy and clean. Audience, let's see if they can freeze on count 4 this time. What count do you freeze on? 4. Hiya. Hiya. 5, 6, ready, count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ooh, okay, I saw a couple of mistakes, which is fine. Is it okay to mess up at NDI? Yeah. Is it okay to give up? Yeah. No, we gotta try again. Hi-ya! Hi-ya! What count do you freeze on? 4. Down, down. Try again. 5, 6, ready, count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Woo! They nailed it. Audience, you throw out a count that you want them to freeze on from 1 to 8. 6. Okay, what count do you freeze on? 6. Hi-ya! Hiya! Let's freeze on 6. 5, 6, ready, go! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One extra little 7. Do take 2. Now we count 1 until the whole team has it. It's okay though. Can we try again? What count do you freeze on? 6. Hiya! Try again. 5, 6, ready, go! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Woo! They nailed it that time. Okay, I think you can stretch a little higher. So dancers, this time I want you to do it in slow motion. Hiya! 5, 6, ready, go!
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Ooh, nice. I want to go back to the whole chapter now. Can we go a little bit faster?
Yeah.
That was great. You really took the time to stretch. I think you can stretch even further. Hiya! A little faster. Listen to the tempo. 5, 6, ready, go!
1, 2, 3,
Oh yeah!
5, 6,
Woo!
7, 8.
Faster. Hiya! 5, 6, ready, go!
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Even faster. Hiya! 5, 6, ready, go!
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay, watch this, audience. It's going to be supersonic warp speed. Have a seat. Nicely done. All right, so we play a lot of games in NDI, and one of the things that we do is have energy competitions to see how exciting it can be. So I'm going to cut these dancers in half and make a team here. Elena, let's cut it right here. This guy's going to be the red chilies. What does that make you guys? Green chilies. It's going to be a competition, the red versus the green. I need one representative from the red team. Get up here, Azariah. I need one representative from the green team. Zena, get up here. Okay, now shake hands. It's a friendly competition. Okay, turn and face the audience. Mayor Ken, you're going to be a judge in just a second, just so you know. Turn and face the audience this way. Okay, show us chapter 1, and audience, you're going to decide based on applause who has more energy. Good luck. Yeah. Good luck. 5, 6, ready, go.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, don't worry, that was great. Yeah, I love that you just jumped everywhere. It's totally great. Okay, By round of applause, do you think the red had more energy or the green? Go ahead, audience. Red. Let's hear it for red. Nicely done, Azrael. What about the green? Oh, it's kind of like a tie. I would say just a tad bit more for Azrael. Azrael, pick two people to join your team. Pick two people to join your team. All right. Round number 2. Pick the rest. Okay, great. Turn face this way. Red has the first round. Let's see if Green can come back this time. Ready? Here we go. Hiya! Chapter 1. 5, 6, ready, go!
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Woo! Okay, audience, let's hear it for the green team. Or did the red team take it again? You totally had more applause that time. Okay, we're going to do a tiebreaker. All the red versus all the green, and Mayor Ken is going to be the judge. Mayor Ken, do you want the red team or the green team first?
Oh, it doesn't matter, but I guess let's just start on my left.
Great. Green team, stay standing. Red team, have a seat. Okay, so Mayor Ken, you're looking for lots of energy. It's okay if they make a mistake. We're just looking for lots of energy. Good luck, green team. Hiya! Okay, chapter 1. 5, 6, ready, go!
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Remember that, Mayor Ken. Have a seat. Let's see the red team stand up. Good luck. Hiya! 5, 6, ready, go!
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Mayor Ken for the tiebreaker. Who
I'm gonna have to go with the red.
The red team. Awesome. Dancers, please stand up. Cross your arms. Good, 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 good. You're doing so great. We had such a little time to rehearse, so I'm so proud of them. I go first. Turn your face this way. We're at the end of our presentation, and we have a special way of saying goodbye and thank you. We take it from a ballet tradition called reverence, where we show respect to each other for working so hard. I'm going to say thank you, dancers. You say thank you, Allie, and then we'll thank our audience. Are you ready? I go first, and then you go. Thank you, dancers.
Thank you, Allie.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Mayor Ken.
Thank you, Mary Ken.
Thank you, council members.
Thank you, council.
Thank you, audience.
Thank you, audience.
And goodbye.
Goodbye.
At the end of class, we also like to teach the dancers how to say thank you and goodbye in other languages. And we have a healthy goodbye that we're going to show you today. So this is our Ferrari goodbye. And we're trying to get the message that they need to take care of this vessel for really good things in your body so you can live a long, healthy life. Are you ready? Okay, put your hand on the steering wheel. Think in your mind what color you want your Ferrari to be. Start cruising. Oh yeah. Put your shade on. Roll down the window. Get your hands out the window. Woo, we're cruising. I go first and then you go. My car is a Ferrari.
My car is a Ferrari.
My body's just as cool.
My body's just as cool.
To keep it running fast and strong,
Keep it running fast and strong.
I've got to use good fuel.
I got to use the fuel.
High octane for my engine.
I got it for my engine.
Veggies for my brain.
Veggies for my brain.
Say, junk food makes me wild.
Junk food makes me wild.
Protein keeps me tame.
Protein makes me tame.
Toss the soda, toss the fries.
Toss the soda, toss the fries.
Give me carrots for my eyes.
Give me carrots
Woo!
for my eyes.
I love my salads, fruits, and beans.
Love my salads, fruits, and beans.
They will keep me long and lean.
They will keep me
I go first. Be healthy dancers.
Be healthy, Allie.
Be healthy, Steve.
Be healthy, Steve.
Say, be healthy, council members.
Be healthy, council
Say,
members.
be healthy, Mayor Ken.
Be healthy, Mayor Ken.
Be healthy, audience.
Be healthy, audience.
Be goodbye. Audience, can we hear it one more time? Really? Audience, so proud of yourself. Clap your arms. Stand really good. Did you have fun? You looked great. Hit it, Steve.
Okay, that was really, really nice to have. So thank you, Hermosa Elementary, for your participation in NDI. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got our Pets of the Week, Amy DeFelix from our Animal Services. Before we do that, just in case the Mayor Pro Tem has any comments, I need a motion and a second to allow Mayor Pro Tem Cassandra Gandara to participate telephonically.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion made by Councilor Flores, second by Councilor Bencomo to allow Mayor Pro Tem Cassandra Gandara to participate in our work session telephonically.
This is on a motion to allow Councilor Gandara to participate telephonically. Councilor Abeyta?
Yes.
Councilor Graham?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councilor Coran?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Oh, yes.
Councilor Gandara?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and start with our Pets of the Week. And Amy DeFelix, are you on Zoom?
Hello, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You might be able to hear the puppies in my office as well, but usually the webcam mic is pretty good at muting background sound. But hello, I am Amy DeFelix. I am one of the rescue coordinators for the Animal Services Center of the Mesilla Valley, and then every week I present Pets of the Week. So we'll start by this week. Let me share my screen. Hopefully we don't have any difficulties this time. Alrighty. And first, we'll start off with our, there we go, cat of the week. His name is Frank. His number is 61134. And he says, I'm a quiet boy who purrs like a motor. I'm also a diligent biscuit eater whenever I think I'm about to get some pets. You might also notice that I'm more of a tree-dwelling cat, meaning I like to be up high to hang out and survey the area. My ideal family has a cat tree or two for me to lounge in, and they'd also give me all the love and pets I could ask for. And then we also have our dog of the week. His name is Thor, and his number is 55595. And he says, I was once in a home with a family, but I've since been at the ASCMV for almost 7 months. I need to be taught how to be calm on a leash, but I'm eager to please and treat motivated. I'm good with other dogs, and I'm very sweet with people. I have a lot of pent-up energy that my future family will help me work out in a healthy way, but my unconditional love is the best reward. And for our adoption event this Saturday, we will be at Pioneer Bank on University. That's 705 East University Avenue. We will be there from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. We'll have some dogs, some wonderful, fabulous canines for you guys to meet, and they'll all be already fixed, so it'll be easy. It'll be easy just to adopt them and then take them home right away. And they're definitely waiting to meet you all. And now to keep on with the topic of the month that I decided to use kitten season, I'd like to share some recent statistics. I pulled these. It'll be from May 1st to the 22nd, so the entirety of the month so far, of how many cats and kittens have come in. So since the beginning of the month, a total of 316 cats in total came in. And out of that 316, 117, which is 77%, are kittens that are too young to be adopted. And so in our data reporting, we classify them neonates, 0 to 4 weeks old, and baby, which is 4 to 8 weeks old. And 8 weeks is the age that we are allowing, that they are old enough to be adopted. So anything under that, like the baby would be considered, it's all too young. And with these two demographics, we heavily rely on fosters and rescue commitments in order to increase the life savings on these kittens. Because if they can't be adopted, the only way they can get out of the ASCMV, other than, I guess, waiting until they grow up and hopefully they're still healthy enough to be adopted, is for a rescue or foster to take them in as soon as possible. I have some charts to kind of help visualize it. This is just the total cat intake. The whole entire pie is 316 cats. Let me see if I can get a laser pointer. 316 cats, so a good majority, 45%, was adults between 1 and 8 years, so that's a good decent amount. And a lot of these, not a lot, but a good portion of these are also cats that are too feral to be, they have to be TNR'd and stuff like that. But then there's also these two portions, which take up a good, I believe, 37%. This is the, I believe, the babies, which is 38%, and the neonates, no, this is backwards, sorry. The babies, 4 to 8 weeks old, or we had 79 of those come in, and then the neonates, the newborns, the bottle babies, we had 38 of those come in. Just this month, and the month's not even over yet. Sorry, if you hear my puppies, I apologize. And these are the ones that we definitely put a more deeper focus on posting for fosters or rescues to get them out, because they are the ones that's the only way they can get out holistically. And I have another chart. It's the breakdown of the 117 kittens, which the 117 ones that are too young to be adopted, and just to kind of showcase how rescue and foster really impacts this. And just in general, the biggest chunk, which is the 26%, this is the current status of the kittens, by the way, I should mention. 31 or 26% are kittens that the status is currently deceased. That doesn't necessarily mean that they were euthanized, but it does mean when they are this young, it is very easy for them to, like we call it failure to thrive, and they pass away, and it's very unfortunate, but it's pretty common when they're away from their mother. Even in a foster situation, it's kind of an epidemic, I guess, animal rescue sees all the time. Even if we have a foster system, sometimes the little ones will just pass away if they're away from their mother. But 21 or 18% of these 117 kittens are currently in foster, available for rescue tags, or I guess until they're old enough to become adoptable. 19 of these kittens, or 16%, have been transferred out. We label it transferred out pending acceptance, but that's transferred out to rescues. 16% of these little guys already went to a rescue, so they are in the care of a lovely, no-kill nonprofit to help kind of raise them and have them thrive and have them adopted into homes in those areas. And then we have 17 or 15% of the kittens that are currently available for rescue and foster. So they are here. They are old enough to stay here by themselves, but they're still too young for adoption. So these are the ones that are kind of in the limbo state, where they kind of are essentially forced to hang out here until they either grow up enough to be adopted, or we have a foster or rescue willing to take them in before that. So these chunks are definitely, and then we have strays, the ones that are already adopted, stray fosters, and so on and so on. But the biggest chunk that we have between the ones that are already in foster, the ones that went to rescue, and the ones that need to be either fostered or rescued, it's definitely, this is kind of a hope that shows that this highlights kind of how important we provide rescues and fosters to help us out during kitten season. And so we highly encourage you to be willing to help out, to sign up to foster, definitely, not even just with us, but helping to foster local nonprofits like APA or Cat's Meow or others. It helps the whole community during kitten season. But thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amy. We appreciate that information. Okay, next we're going to have Irene Para from the Economic Development Department give us our jobs of the week.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. Irene Para with Economic Development. No, I don't see it here. I'm not seeing 522. Well, there it is. Oh, it's empty. Well, that's not good. Not sure where they went. Adrian, are you available? I'm not sure where this presentation went. The work sessions? Yes. Okay. Yeah, it's empty.
Well, I know one job that's open at the end of the year will be the mayor of Las Cruces. It starts January 1st, 2024.
There that is. Okay. Oh, well, what happened?
Irene, we can double up
Okay.
next council meeting.
Okay,
That'd be
no
fine.
problem.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And so with that, we have 3 items on the agenda. First one being the Civilian Police Oversight Commission discussion. We have 3 speakers. It will be Dr. Neeson, Peter Goodman, and Dr. Bobby Green. So, Doctor, who's going to go first? Yeah, you're welcome to either speak there at the table, or if you want to come to the podium. Okay. All we need you to do is just state your name. And
Peter Goodman. And before I start, I got to say I enjoyed that performance, particularly because I had been watching one very similar to that from Seattle, where my great-grandson, whose birthday this is, was turning 10 and was performing. But so it kind of made me sad as well as enjoying it. But I want to thank you all for scheduling this discussion today. Obviously, we think it's a critical one, and so do some of you. I'll briefly introduce the subject, why we need a Citizens Police Oversight Committee or board or review board, and how it would help Las Cruces. Dr. Earl Nissen will then talk about how it's working in some other places, particularly where there are hybrid models involving OIC, as I think we might end up doing here if you folks approve this. And then NAACP Chair Dr. Bobby Green will discuss in more detail the nature of the problem here and what else is being done or trying to be done about that. And then finally, one of the counselors urged us to address legal issues. How does our proposal comport with the city charter, first of all, with the existence of other committees in the city, and particularly important with the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement of the Las Cruces Police Association, and similar rights that are embedded in our statutes, such as the Peace Officers' Bill of Rights. Spoiler alert, it's fully compatible with all of those. I had intended to start by playing the 38-second video in which Amelia Baca is shot to death. I was asked not to do that, so obviously we won't. Without getting into the details of that, most of you have probably seen it. That video is troubling. Even law enforcement professionals that I've shown it to or talked to about it, who think that the shooter did not disobey any rules, are really troubled by it and think they would have handled it otherwise. 2 points from the standpoint of what we're talking about today. One is, a year and a month out, we have no information from the chief of police, the 3rd Judicial District Attorney, the city manager, the Attorney General of the state of New Mexico, nothing from nobody. We don't know if the officer is going to be charged or has been cleared. But the other point is that if the Las Cruces Police Department's training and internal rules insulate the shooter from discipline, the public should understand that and understand why, and a CPOC or board would be looking into helping make that clear, but also into helping to improve those rules and training. As Dr. Green will discuss, Amelia Baca is not alone. Folks could reasonably argue over the details of any of these shootings, but I don't think anyone could deny that there have been a disproportionate number of what we'll call questionable shootings for a city our size in the last few years. So what would a Citizens Police Oversight Board do? Many things. First, obviously, it would bring the public into the process. Focusing more brains on any problem at issue, we often reach some wisdom. But in addition here, a diverse board, including people often marginalized in the US and even Las Cruces, would bring fresh ideas to the discussion. And by opening up the discussion, we'd both improve law enforcement and educate the community. The board would review policies, practices, and procedures and recommend improvements. It might have identified a problem like the chokehold that Officer Smelser used on Mr. Valenzuela, and which was later abrogated as an approved tactic. It might or might not have identified that. We don't know because it didn't exist. There's also, to give you another example of what I would hope a board would do, there's a legitimate issue about how far you chase somebody who's got a warrant out on him or her for drinking in public, urinating in public, DWI, whatever it might be, but not a violent crime. Obviously, if you stop a car and somebody in there has a warrant for a really violent offense or is a present danger to the public, you want to get that person off the streets. But if it's somebody for some non-violent, certainly non-capital offense, maybe you chase the person, but at some point, let them go. Don't get into a fight, a big argument or a chase that could endanger bystanders, the police officer, and or the victim. So that kind of decision, which the chief of police gets to make, the public also has an interest in, because we could be bystanders. We could be suspected wrongly of something. Or my great-grandson, who is of color, could be running from some warrant that doesn't mean anything and get in a fight with the police and be dead. So there are those kinds of issues that it would address. CPOC or board would also enhance police communication with the public. First of all, it would be open to and encourage and likely gain some trust in people who are afraid to bring complaints about the police to the police because, wrongly I think, they probably think, they may think they won't get to leave the police station if they bring a complaint about the police to the police. It also would help explain the police. There are a lot of situations where somebody in law enforcement does something that doesn't make sense to a bystander, but actually is what that person has to do in that situation. CPOC would not only help communicate that to the public, but help be believed by the public. Evidence from other cities indicates that crime rises when there are well-publicized incidents, such as we've had, of police violence or alleged police violence. If a board could limit those at all, that would not only help with our public treasury, but might help reduce violence against the police, make them less of a target, encourage more people who are witnesses to cooperate. Further, officers who are aware that a board may be taking a look at what they've done, even in minor incidents, and see complaints, they may tend to conform their conduct to the rules a little more consistently. We're not wedded to the language of the proposed ordinance. There's room for tinkering. These councils, as Dr. Nissen will be saying, work in many, many cities. They've dealt with the same kinds of problems we would have to hear, whether you call it a commission or a board. We need one. Only a couple of points seem essential, and after I mention them, I'll sit down and let Earl take over. But first is that the board or commission get all documents, not just what the police chief chooses to send. Secondly, that it's a diverse board with no one unduly biased against either the police or any ethnic group. Bottom line, and I'll be brief on this because I think that Dr. Green's going to address it more fully. What we're doing is a spectacular failure, whether you count by dead people, by corpses, or by huge settlements where the city didn't even like its position enough to even think about going to trial. And while ultimately the safety of our police officers is essential and a top priority, some potential changes might help on that score, and other suggestions would improve citizens' safety without unduly endangering police. Ultimately, the knowledge that working officers have of what they see on the street is essential, but opening the discussion up in a way that forces the police administration to look at alternatives but leaves law enforcement able to reject suggestions and advice cannot hurt. Dr. Nissen?
Mr. Mayor, I was going to ask, how many of you are here to speak about this issue?
Can you raise your hands? Keep them up for just a minute, please. So I've got just one on this side. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, thank you.
Okay, before I want to...
I just need you to state your name, Dr. Nissen.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Roland Nissen, and I live in Las Cruces. I want to make some assumptions before we say and tell you what we would like to see in the Oversight Board. You should have a copy of this. I think she distributed it to you. There seems to me there's some interest on the part of the council for discussion on police reform because of approving this work session. Second assumption that there are over 200 citizens police oversight boards in the United States giving support to the idea of having a citizens oversight board in Las Cruces. Also, there are no two oversight boards alike. Fourth, the OIR is respected and a competent organization to do inspections of police complaints and works with citizens oversight boards in making certain recommendations are carried out by the police departments. 5, that an ordinance establishing a police oversight board would assist the council by having an outside group that would monitor police complaints monthly and making public reports to the council. 6, that the present OIR contract does not cover investigating critical incidents such as police shootings resulting in injury or death. OIR should cover these incidents. As Mr. Gnacco, CEO of OIR, and I heard him say this at a public meeting that I virtually attended in Eureka, California. He said, for example, as in Anaheim, we are immediately notified of an in-custody death, officer-involved shooting, or another critical incident. And then we work with the officer and city manager to provide some preliminary information to the community-based review board about what is happening in your city regarding police involvement in a critical incident. This would include having an OIR representative visiting the site of a critical incident along with members of the review board. OIR would continue to keep the review board apprised of the investigation. This type of investigation could have, if in the contract, had been done in the LCPD shootings. I am assuming critical incidents investigations will be added to the new OIR contract. 7, having a Citizens Police Oversight Board would open up lines of communication between LCPD and the community. 8, that the city hiring an inspector general for the oversight committee only increases more secrecy since the oversight meetings are closed to the public. I did an inspection of public records request of the minutes for this committee. Of note, during the December 21st, 2022 Oversight Committee meeting, a discussion took place about having public attend their meetings. Mr. Tucker, member of the Oversight Committee, said, if they have an agenda, meaning the public, that they are trying to draw us into, then let's get it out in the open, get it filmed. We can tell everybody no, they presented, had nothing to do with us, they got their 5 minutes of fame, and they were tossed out. That doesn't sound very favorable for public participation. Also, the Inspector General falls under the city legal department, so is not an independent inspector who would possibly be handling police department complaints. The job description for this position does not directly assign inspection of police complaints as an assigned duty. We are paying this person $124,000 annually. Number 9, the citizens review boards in the U.S. go by many different names. We have in the ordinance used oversight board and have discussed that possibly has managerial connotations. We were willing to discuss this after our presentation. So in my presentation, I will refer to the Citizens Review Board for Las Cruces. Because of time constraints, let me begin by telling what model of a Citizen Police Review Board we are requesting after reviewing the 5 cities' oversight plans that I've given you in advance. Number 1, we would use the hybrid model as defined by Nicole, which I've included in the header sheet for the 5 city summaries. First, a city needs an independent oversight board established by an ordinance that monitors complaints and is able to participate in the investigations of the complaints. The city must employ a professional investigative organization to conduct the investigations of the police complaints. This organization must be independent from a city council, the police department, and the Citizens Review Board. OIR is already contracted by Las Cruces to conduct investigations, and adoption of the proposed ordinance would give us the second part of the hybrid model. All 5 cities reviewed have this relationship between OIR and an established citizens board. Another purpose of the review board would be to cooperate with LCPD in sponsoring community education and events that would help explain policing in Las Cruces. Number 2, the hiring of an independent position to be called liaison or independent monitor, but they were hired to collect all complaints from LCPD Internal Affairs, the mayor's office, city councilors, and oversight members, or from others responsible for receiving complaints, because we learned OIR at the present time does not get all of the complaints from the police department. This position would develop a process of getting the complaints to the review board for investigation and getting the complaints to OIR. This position would, with the assistance of OIR, obtain camera recordings and all police reports that can legally be shown from an incident. OIR would put together the final investigation report and send back to the monitor and review board. The review board would, within legal boundaries, keep the community apprised of what is happening with an investigation. The final OIR reports would monthly be given to the review board for release to the public after a complete investigation is conducted of the complaints. The monitor will coordinate meetings with the police department and the review board to review policy or procedural changes from OIR recommendations. The review board would be on the agenda for one of the monthly meetings of the City Council to review the investigations and allow public input about the investigations. The reporting would be done within the law of protecting officers' privacy. Number 5, a budget for our proposal would include salary of full or part-time liaison independent monitor would be $50,000 or $100,000 if full-time. It would depend on a number of complaints that have to be dealt with, whether it be full-time or part-time. And then OIR, we're contracting them right now for $75,000. And then an important part is transcribing of minutes of meetings.
Excuse me, Dr. Neeson,
Investigation.
can you talk into the microphone? Yes, sir.
Another 50,000. I'm sorry. I'll go through those again if I didn't hear. A budget for our proposal would include salary of full or part-time liaison independent monitor would be $50,000 or $100,000. We are paying OIR $75,000, and then transcribing of the minutes, meetings, and complaint investigations, $50,000. This proposal is supported by the systems used in the police review boards in the 5 cities I have described who have iterations that meet the criterion of the hybrid model of police oversight. We believe that this type of oversight can help assure the community that proper investigations are made of police misconduct. By opening the lines of communication between the community and the LCPD, citizens would gain positive feelings for living more safely in Las Cruces. Our proposal would give the City Council a better opportunity for having more accountability and transparency of the police department. In the 5 cities packet, you have the ordinances that created oversight boards in Eureka, California, Santa Monica, California, and Boulder, Colorado. You can compare our proposed ordinance with these 3 with the understanding that these communities are having successful police oversight. I want to add to the Boulder, Colorado summary in the packet. Last Tuesday night, Peter Goodman and I did a 1-hour Zoom with the co-chairs of the Police Oversight Panel of Boulder. They reviewed their procedures for doing investigations, but they added, because panel members participate directly in the investigations of the complaints, they are given a $200 stipend monthly, and co-chairs each get $250 a month. Now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Green.
Thank you, Dr. Neeson. Bobby Green, President of the Doñana County NAACP. Mayor Miyagashima, Manager Peely, and ladies of the City Council, thank you for the opportunity to listen to us today. We appreciate it very much, and we do not take this lightly. The City of Las Cruces, as you have heard, has already paid millions of dollars to settle excessive use of force lawsuits. I am aware of at least 4 additional multi-million-dollar lawsuits currently on the docket. Those victims who are represented in those lawsuits, they had families. We saw these beautiful children up here dancing and looking so happy and healthy. It's a beautiful thing to see. The victims of this excessive force by the police, I've seen the videos, all of those victims had families, they had children, they had grandchildren. Amelia Baca was killed in front of her grandchildren and her children. And so, civil rights have been ignored, basic human decency has been ignored, people have been killed, families have been forever broken. This is happening on your watch. But more importantly, this is happening on all of our watch. The entire city of Las Cruces, it is happening on our watch. We're paying for this problem. We are all paying for this problem. All of us are taxpayers. We are all, including you, are paying for this problem. Surely, we should be able to collaborate, to work together on a solution. Las Cruces now has the dubious distinction of being in the same category as other cities: Ferguson, Newark, Minneapolis, Louisville, Albuquerque. All of those cities have been called upon by the Department of Justice. They've been investigated by the Department of Justice, and sadly, it's time for Las Cruces to do the same. Therefore, I've already contacted, on behalf of the Donna Ana County NAACP and the citizens of Las Cruces, I've already contacted the Department of Justice. I've already requested an investigation. That is what we do when injustice needs to be addressed. As such, I've invoked the authority given to me by the Donna Ana County NAACP and the National NAACP, and I have requested an investigation by the Department of Justice. So, we have two options as I see it. One, we can tell the Department of Justice that we have made progress and we are collectively working toward a solution ourselves together, or we can wait for the Department of Justice to recommend a solution. The bottom line, we cannot allow the excessive use of force by the Las Cruces Police Department to continue on our watch. I'll close with a statement from former school board member Maria Flores and her husband, Dr. Ernest Flores. Even though we are not present, we are deeply committed to honoring Amelia Baca and all Las Cruces citizens that have had their right to life or their health taken from them by reactive policing. We believe in working together to provide a better relationship with the LCPD through the use of effective policing while protecting the human rights of all citizens. By supporting a Citizens Police Oversight Committee, or a hybrid model, as Dr. Neeson mentioned, the city and its citizens can promote organizational change. Successful police reform would reduce liability, create trust, improve accountability. Police reform is not too much to ask for to protect and preserve human life. It is also honoring those who have been needlessly lost. I agree with the former school board member, and I will say, Las Cruces, on behalf of the Donna Ana County NAACP, I want to thank you in advance for your willingness to work together to break this cycle of excessive use of force by our police department and As Senora Flores said, police reform is not too much to ask for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Green. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our council, city council, if they have to ask any questions. Oh, I'm sorry, there's more? Okay.
I'm going to talk about and again, I'm still Peter Goodman, for the record. I'm going to talk about how the proposal comports with the city charter, statutes of New Mexico, the other existence of other committees in the city, and most importantly, the CBA collective bargaining agreement with the Las Cruces Police Association. I'll try to be brief, both because legal stuff is boring and because at least the charter part of it, I suspect you folks already know, even if not everybody does. But the city charter in no way precludes creating a board like we've talked about. As you know, City Charter Section 2.04 provides, quote, all powers of the city shall be vested in the council, except as otherwise provided by law or the charter, and the council shall provide for the exercise thereof. The charter further provides that the administration of the city's affairs shall be divided into organizational units established by the council and, quote, under the direction and supervision of the city manager. Such organizational units include fire department, police department, I think the city clerk, et cetera. They do actual things as part of the city conducting its business. And Section 2.05C provides that neither the mayor, the council, or any individual councilor can interfere with the city manager's discharge of those duties. And if this board were given powers to hire or discipline officers, deploy police in the streets, change the procedures of LCPD, that arguably would violate the charter. But the board is an advisory committee, not an organizational unit. Although it's to have access to all pertinent documents, it'll use those to make recommendations, not to fire or suspend people or anything else. They're basically, an advisory committee is defined as a body that provides non-binding strategic advice. It has no decision-making powers. It doesn't perform as an organizational unit, obviously. So it is not precluded. It's worth noting also, perhaps, that under New Mexico law and the city charter, the council has the power to protect its inhabitants, keep the peace and order, and to establish boards and commissions. Section 4.05 of the charter specifically grants the council broad authority to, quote, provide a method for receiving and acknowledging and striving to resolve complaints and grievances, unquote. The proposed board as an advisory body is simply a vehicle to receive and investigate such complaints and to provide several varieties of advice designed ultimately to help you make Las Cruces a better and safer place for all. So in short, you can do this under the charter if you choose to do it. Now, Mayor Miyagishima has suggested at one point that he could turn one of the existing committees into such a board. And maybe you could turn a deer into a horse too, or a packing cart into a wine bottle. So I'll just take a moment to address that. The two existing committees are not designed to be a police review board. That's not their expertise, nor could they be stretched to be one. First, they're so secret that even city councilors will tell you that they have a hard job finding out what goes on at those committees unless they happen to sit on that particular committee. Now, the mayor tried to prevent the work session that we're now thankfully having on this, and then suggested, well, we can pass this on to one of the committees. And a counselor immediately pointed out that that was perhaps suggested because the mayor could use the committee to kill the proposal. Turning such a small, selective body, secretive body, into a citizen-oriented board would be quite a task. A citizen-oriented board designed to shine light on these matters and cooperate with disaffected community members. Also, each of those committees presumably does something useful for the city. I know there's some good people on it, like former counselor and hospital executive Jack Ekman, municipal judge Kieran Ryan, and these small committees that keep what they're doing secret must be doing something that's helpful to the city. And if you turned that either of those committees into a big public deal with a whole lot of people, then you'd have to replace it for what it used to do, because you'd have a bunch of people chosen for their relationship to law enforcement issues. It would be much more public. A secretive board is just a bad place to start for a board that's designed to help community relations. You don't fix a lack of transparency and a shortage of fresh ideas by convening a secretive committee with very little diversity and adding a couple more people. Now, the most important part of what I need to address is how this comports with the Las Cruces Police Association, City of Las Cruces collective bargaining agreement. And it does comport with it. Several of us have reviewed the CBA carefully, and there's not a real problem here. Should note that this board is much different from internal affairs, and the important part of the CBA, the professional standards section, discusses how investigations by internal affairs will go, and some of the rules and that sort of thing. This is a vehicle for enhanced communications and trust between law enforcement and the citizens, with a responsibility to investigate all aspects of police department and make recommendations on policies, procedures, improved training, communications, and discipline in specific cases. And again, the board has no authority to discipline anybody. The CBA nowhere provides that it is the exclusive way for Las Cruces to address police matters and how the police department is working or might be improved. It nowhere suggests that the city can't seek an officer's testimony on pertinent matters. Most of the CBA's professional standards section guarantees rights that the board would also observe. I think it would have to, not only under the contract, but in many cases under state law. Advise the officer subject in advance, limit questioning to 2 hours or less, permit a union representative to be present, afford the officer the right to present testimony and documents that he or she might want to. That's what the board would do anyway, and the officer would be paid for time testifying before the board as per that provision of the CBA, and the officer's guarantee rights against self-incrimination would be fully respected. Further, if you read the CBA, to the extent that the association might complain of anything of the board's actions or suggestions, Section 45 provides for the resolution of such problems. It provides, quote, the employer and the association may, upon mutual agreement and negotiation, place in effect a memorandum of understanding which may change provisions of this agreement or address matters which may become issues of mutual concern from time to time. If there were any problem that the police association had with the functioning of the board, that would be just such a matter of mutual interest. The board would require the LCPD to provide documents and would ask officers to testify. If they chose not to, that would be up to the chief of police, whether that was a disciplinable matter. The one point that well, the board would have trouble observing it because when they renewed, city and the police renegotiated the agreement, they screwed up. They had a provision that said basically that the officer will be made aware of the complainant's identity, all complainant's identity, except if, and they had in the previous version, and the law states that if the police chief determines that it would be dangerous or impede the investigation to name the complainant, then that won't happen. Unfortunately, they screwed up and they deleted all but the first 3 words of the paragraph that said that part. But the board would figure to not identify some of the complainants because they would have come to the board on that understanding. The exception provided in the bargaining union and in the law should authorize that. And as a practical matter, I think the police officer in most cases, having done the investigation, written the reports on the basic case, probably can make an educated guess as to who the complainant was. I would further note that the hundreds of other cities using a CPOC also have police unions and also have worked out anything that needs to be worked out. It's not impossible. In closing, I just want to say, reiterate that such oversight boards are helping create police accountability in a lot of places. No charter, law, or union contract prevents you from taking this step. It's likely to help. It's hard to see any way that it could hurt. And we're happy to respond to questions from the council. We understand that this is a politically risky step. But if you don't try this very promising idea, if you don't try it now because it's not politically convenient, how will you feel when you watch the next video of a citizen getting killed by our police officers, your police officers? If you do not try to make a real difference, what will you say to the family of the deceased, to the citizens who are tired of seeing vast sums paid out to litigants where the city's case is so hopeless that the city doesn't even attempt a trial? Or what will you say to the Department of Justice representatives who arrive responding to the NAACP proposal asking, well, what has the city done? Thank you very much, and we'll stand, or rather sit, for questions.
So that concludes your presentation, Peter? Okay. Yes, I'll let my colleagues ask questions. I will like to clarify one thing, Peter. When I had talked about the advisory board, I mentioned that I currently have a mayor's advisory board, and I use the example of a veterans advisory board, and they provide information to me. And so I don't know if either you misunderstood that, or I don't know what you'd heard, but I wasn't trying to turn a particular board in. They have separate duties, but nonetheless. Let me start with Mayor Pro Tem, see if she has any questions, and if not, then I'll go down to Councilor Flores. Do you have any questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to the group that came forward and presented. I'm wondering if we have other organizations present, like the ACLU, the union, to speak to that, or maybe my question is more around maybe to Mr. Peely and the negotiations that do occur with our union. EFO, is there something that you can help kind of clarify for us as it relates to something like this and the union?
Mayor, Councilman Pro Tem, I have not spoken to the union, so I hate to speak for them, but just on the surface, we internally in staff, we recognize that this could be a concern. Just the way we read it, the way we interpret it, but I haven't approached the subject with the union yet. So I don't know if I have any information coming from them, but again, just from my staff internally, we look at this as something that does cause concern. We can anticipate concern coming from them, but I hate to speak in their, in their behalf or for any representation from them.
No, I didn't want you to speak on behalf of the union. I just wanted to see if someone on staff, and I would assume there's a union representative in the audience, and if there's not, I'm not sure if Chief Dominguez has had that opportunity to have the conversation. And then secondly, when is our union up for our union contract up for negotiation?
Mayor Pro Tem Ifo here. So we just concluded not too long ago the negotiations for the union contract. So it's not up for a couple of years, but I don't believe there are any representatives from the union in the audience. But again, our thought was to hear the presentation. If this was something that the council was considering, that would be the first place we would go, is talk to the union about what concerns they would have, if any.
Thank you, Ifo. Thank you. And then I understand that is there a presentation by the ACLU, or will they be Mayor speaking at public comment?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I was not aware of any other presentations. I did see a gentleman raise his hand. He most likely will be part of when I allow the public to have some comment. But I can tell you, based on the amount of time that we're probably going to give to the residents is going to be a small amount of time each, because we have 2 other items on the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. Those are all the questions that I have thus far.
Okay. Councilor Flores, you had your hand light up?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Green and Dr. Neeson and Dr. Goodman. I know JDs don't like to be called doctors, but thank you all for your very hard work, presentation of your very hard work. In looking at the 5 cities that you selected, the demographics were quite different, and the only one that maybe comes close, amazingly enough, is Davis, California, which is a university town, and has Dr. Martin Luther King Law School there too as well. But and in that town, the NAACP, the Mexican American group, and another group were really behind this. So I'm happy to see this. However, all of the municipalities that you presented to us seem to be, the inception of the oversight boards have been pretty recent. So there's really no data, at least not in the reports that you presented, that have any kind of outcomes. In terms of, has crime gone down? Has there been less brutality? Has there been less, this, that, and the other? Notwithstanding, I think that what you've done is a phenomenal job. It's very well done. I know that our political analyst, Sergio Ruiz, prepared some data, and he actually included Beaumont, Texas, which is, I think, northeast of Houston but at any rate, that one too doesn't really have a demographic breakdown. But I think that would be helpful in terms of having, if it's at all possible, in terms of having apples to apples type of thing. And then also the population and the ratio of police officers is different than what we have as well. There was one city that had a population that was close to us, and that would be Boulder, Colorado. And I really don't know about the demographics there either. But I really like the fact that all of you emphasize the fact that this would not in any way wouldn't keep the oversight committees from functioning, and that we would have transparency, which has been lacking. And I agree with you, Mr. Goodman, that we have settled too many cases. I've always said, fight them, fight them. But for whatever reasons, they have settled. So, so in terms of and also in terms of akin to the demographics, is there any data as to which neighborhoods are affected? And yeah, and how these changes would affect outcomes. And then if a police officer, some of these included having a police officer appear before the oversight board, would they have counsel, legal counsel, not one of us there, but legal counsel present?
They would have, if they wanted a union representative, I would imagine that if they wanted, they would, I mean, I'm not on the board, that would be for the board to decide, but if I were on the board, I'd say yeah. Like the union rep, not interfering with it, but certainly observing and making a statement if he or she wanted to. But yeah, that certainly would be feasible. Let me just say that we had sent earlier information about some other cities. I think Dr. Nissen was concentrating on these 5 because of the city's connection with OIC. And
OIR.
OIR, sorry. OIR and the fact that OIR was functioning there in tandem with these councils. But we can certainly, if you're interested, we can provide probably some more information of the type you're looking for. Not immediately, but.
Yeah, thank you. And for the public who doesn't know who OIR is, we also employ them to a certain degree, not to the extent of the board, but and Michael Giannaco was previously with the Justice Department, and the department, he was in the Civil Rights Office. He was the head of the, no, he was not the head of the Civil Rights Office. He was the second in line to Deval Patrick, who went on to become governor of Massachusetts. So, see, I do have another.
May I say one other thing about what you said while you're looking for that? I'm not necessarily blaming the law department or the lawyers or the outside lawyers for settling the cases. You know, some of those cases may have been hopeless.
Yeah.
So I'm not second guessing the lawyers.
Yeah. Well, you know how lawyers are. So I think that if there's any way of gathering information, not that it would in any way impede my support of having this oversight board established, but it'd be great to see if there's any data out there on how these changes and this oversight board has affected and what the outcomes have been. And that's, again, thank you very much, Dr. Green, Mr. Goodman, and Dr. Nissen, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Bencomo, then Councilor Graham and Nabeta.
No, Councilor Graham first.
Councilor Graham.
Thank you. Thank you all. Councilor Flores really, at the end, raised the question I have in my primary question being, what is the empirical data available that demonstrate that these boards are effective for the problems that we're looking to solve? And let me just walk you through quickly. I read carefully the packet that was presented to us. Of the 5 cities, I went to their individual websites to get a look at how they were framing their boards. I went to the NACOL website to see how NACOL was framing their boards. I went to OIR to look at independent OIR reports for each of the cities and looked for meta-analyses of oversight boards generally and how they perform. And what I could find was nothing. There was no real hard data that showed that cities that implement these kind of boards show a decrease. I'm not saying that it's not true. I'm saying I was unable to find it. The closest that I was able to come was an independent OIR report for Anaheim, which it looks like they piloted their oversight board for 2016 and 2017, and then made it official in 2018. And there was no appreciable change in use of force reports pre or post the board. And that was the closest I could find to any kind of hard data. Do you have information on that? Can you give me any indication of how, going from the metrics that were mentioned the most during your presentation, which was loss of life and dollars spent, and realizing that there are other metrics possible, what can you offer right now, or can you give me direction for more research?
Well, the only thing I came up with in some of the conversations I had with different liaison people or the monitors, they did not share any empirical stuff. I would like to have gotten that myself. However, in Boulder, I think they have the most sophisticated system. And I'm sure that we could, as Peter and I talked to the co-chairs of that board, we could dig further and get more empirical data if they have it. I'm not sure either. I cannot 100% say that everyone is exhibiting some model of statistical analysis. I would think that some of the city councils in those 5 cities have probably asked for evaluations of the citizens review boards. And I don't know how much they would allow you to dig into the city council stuff, but I think that could be possible, and I could do that and get as much as I could. I mean, I'm curious too.
If I may, the findings are all over the lot because there have been a lot of these boards where opposition from the police required compromises that made a board that had no power, that had no ability to get the documents, and that kind of thing. I think your question is great. We'll try to go to some of the places that have had these boards longer and see what we can get. Certainly the Department of Justice keeps trying to impose them in situations that seem to require them. But we will work, you've given us some good homework.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bacomo?
Thanks, Mayor. I will keep my questions short. Just a couple of questions. Do you know if Seattle has a citizen oversight board?
I think so.
I don't have that listing I gave you from Nicole with me.
Okay, I couldn't find that they did. However, I did want to note that Seattle's consent decree was just terminated. It just ended. And several of the recommendations that the Department of Justice made and the notable progress they noted that had been made included reduced use of force, improved response to behavioral health crises, improved response to investigative stops, new bias-free policing policy and training, and new supervision model. This is directly from the justice.gov. Obviously, that has additional details on it, but I did note that that I could not find that any recommendations from the DOJ to end their consent decree noted that a board of this type was necessary, and they still made significant progress. And then so I just wanted to note that because I think I think there's many ways in which we can achieve the goals that we all want, which is real community safety. And then my last question for you is on membership. Actually, the Boulder, Colorado, I found an article today that committee since earlier this year has been politically fraught. There has been, it's been sort of riddled with some controversies regarding appointments. And so my question for you was, what have you found that has like measuring any real or perceived bias for membership?
Well, let me say first, the two, the co-chairs of the board, of the panel, they call it a panel, discussed that with us. One of their members made some statements out in the community that were not accepted by the city council. So they pulled her membership on the panel. And they were just as the two co-chairs explained that they were ironing that out, and they were going to have to find another new member.
Thank you.
And their ordinance, provides for how to do that, how to replace a member. I just want to make a comment that we were going to set up a Zoom with Albuquerque, the chief of police, Chief Medina, was going to be on it with us. And they have a liaison, his name is Kelly Manish. And they were going to, we were going to have that Zoom this week with them for all of you to join in on, but the feds at the last moment notified them that they're coming in this week to come in and see if the Albuquerque Police Department has met up to all the sanctions that were thrown up against them. So anyhow, we're going to have that Zoom yet, so maybe.
Thank you.
And I'll make sure
Dr.
it's accessible to all of you.
Thank you. And
if I may, somebody kindly handed me the answer to your question about Seattle. If I read this correctly, they definitely have police oversight. They have both a community police commission and an office of professional accountability.
okay, thank you. I think at the core of it, I agree with this advocate group's goals and desires and the concerns. I also every time I read about a citizen oversight committee, I come across controversies that I think distract from the real work ahead, and that's my biggest concern. I hope that you hear me when I say that. And the reason I also wanted to keep my comments short, Mayor, was because I do want someone from the ACLU to come up, and I would hope you give them at least 5 minutes, because I think they have pertinent and critical information on this. I think they have research. I think they have a good framework for how these pieces fit together.
That'll be fine, Councillor. We'll probably just allow a very small amount of public participation, if that's okay. So
I mean, Mayor, we've never timed work sessions, so I just want to note that.
Yeah, well, I understand, Councillor, but typically there's 3 items, and they usually last about an hour and 15 minutes each. We usually finish, so, but I don't expect us to finish at least until 3.
Okay, I would hope that you give them 5 minutes. I don't think that's a lot to ask.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councilors, for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is Daniel Williams. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the policing policy advocate at the American Civil Liberties Union of New Mexico, and I really appreciate a couple minutes, and I appreciate the timer because I have no internal sense of time. And so just to sort of preamble what I'm going to say, I think the first thing I want to say is that we at the ACLU understand concern about safety in our communities. That concerns are real. We're all New Mexicans. We all see the same things that our neighbors are seeing that is causing concern. And all of us want and deserve to be and feel safe in our communities. And we recognize that the criminal legal system isn't the only way to build safety in our communities. In fact, often it makes us less safe to rely too heavily on the carceral system and not to invest in more meaningful infrastructure for safety in our communities. And so real safety isn't just about how we respond to criminalized behavior, it's also about economic justice and food security and housing and healthcare, and including mental health care and education and more. So with all of that said, I know we're here to talk about policing, but just a reminder that we see this as part of a much larger infrastructure. So the ACLU of New Mexico believes that civilian oversight of the police can be a very good thing. We also recognize that that's hard to pull off well, and that civilian oversight mechanisms can become part of the status quo. And so we have a few things that we look for when we think about civilian police oversight, and I'm going to quickly go through these, and then I have a handout that you can look to for more information if I go through it too fast. One is independent board membership. This is something that Councilor Bencomo just referred to. Broad scope to review complaints, independent investigatory authority, discipline that sticks, findings of facts that determine discipline, the ability to review and make recommendations related to policies and practices, secure funding. Normally what we recommend is that the funding for a CPOC be pegged to the funding of the PD. Due process protections for officers, and public access and reporting to and by the commission. This is something that we see many of these things in the proposed ordinance, that we think that's fantastic, and we hope that as you're moving forward and thinking about what kind of action you want to take on this proposal, these are the things that you keep in mind. We also recognize that any kind of action around oversight is, again, only part of one piece of the puzzle around policing in Las Cruces. And so I also want to briefly touch on a couple other opportunities that we think Las Cruces has to take action to keep all of us safe with regards to our policing. So one is related to use of force. We think that there is a real opportunity for Las Cruces to take action here. Of course, there are two Supreme Court cases, Graham v. Connor and Tennessee v. Garner, that are sort of guideposts for minimum standards for use of force policy, but those don't constrain jurisdictions from adopting higher standards, and so that's something that we would advocate that Las Cruces look at doing, is looking at adopting a higher standard than what's required by federal law. So we would advocate a necessary standard requiring that force only be used when necessary. We'd also advocate that policy expressly prohibit the use of deadly force against the person who only poses a risk to themselves or to property, and that policy explicitly require the use of reasonably available de-escalation tactics and techniques prior to using deadly force. We'd also advocate that policy require that officers stop or reduce the level of force as the individual reduces their resistance or as a threat of harm abates. We think that one thing that policymakers such as yourselves and the community could benefit from is increased data and transparency. So we'd love to see the police department and the city collecting and reporting more comprehensive data, including demographic data related to stops, searches, arrests, and uses of force. And then finally, we think that there's always opportunities for us to look for ways to reduce interactions between the police and members of the public, particularly people who are in mental health crises, people who are experiencing homelessness. So we're really excited about Project Light and about the progress that y'all have made in that regard, and we hope that the city will continue to assess Project Light and consider opportunities to expand non-police responses. So with 9 seconds left, I'm quite proud of myself for timing it that precisely. I'm going to give the clerk the handout if that's okay, and I appreciate y'all's time.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so you're done with your questions?
For now, I am. I think Councilor Abeyta had questions, and then I think I have a couple more comments.
Okay, Councilor Abeyta.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you as well for the presentation. I appreciate you looking at our city charter to see how everything kind of coincides. I'm not sure if you also saw we have standards, policies, and procedures as well within that. My view and interpretation of our charter, I think perhaps is a little bit different, and so when entertaining this conversation, it's definitely something that I would want us to look at for legal. As you mentioned with section 2.4 general powers, it does state that unless something is explicitly directed, then it is under our purview for council. However, this is an area when it comes to personnel matters where there are explicit directions on how we engage and interact. You even quoted and mentioned it with that section 2.05, section C, under resolutions shall be adopted by the council, and sorry, I'm going on to page 8, sorry. Section C is interference with administration. Neither the mayor, council, nor individual councilors shall in any manner usurp the administrative authority of the city manager set forth in Article 3. So when you go through to Article 3, it's section 3.02B, that's on page 11, you can look and see the city manager shall, is subject to removal by us because that is our one employee. But when it comes to powers and duties under that the powers and duties that the city manager have is that of any sort of removal or administrative affairs of personnel. So with that in mind, I am curious to see how a oversight board integrates with that sort of item when they want to look at, and because what it's asking for in this ordinance is to look at HR personnel files. That's something that we as counselors don't even have access to. And as you've mentioned before, when oversight boards don't have access to those items, which it seems that there's probably a legal reason why they don't have access to it, that it makes them less effective, which therefore leads me to think that there are other tools and mechanisms in place that help with accountability and transparency that go beyond this type of board. We can't hear you.
Peter, we can't hear you.
No. Can you hear me?
No.
Too much, probably. First of all, what you said, I think, confirms that although the board could not discipline somebody or discharge somebody, they can opine. You asked actually a couple of questions. Let me throw something in that's relevant that I had wondered about and we learned from the Boulder people. The people on the commission, and not everybody on the commission works on each case, but they sign a confidentiality agreement with regard to any personnel files.
We also have confidentiality in closed sessions, and we are still not allowed access to those. So I am curious to see how that coincides with our charter.
Well, I think that might present a problem, but most of the documents we're talking about are not personnel files. They would be, they might be placed in somebody's personnel file, but they're basically about the cases. So I think that's a fair question. I think it's a question that falls into the how do we do this, not this is a deal breaker category. Because it might be that at the end of the day, personnel specifically, and I'm not saying we'd be asking for these anyway, but specifically like a supervisor's evaluation of somebody working under her would not be available to the board. On the other hand, a lot of documents that are considered confidential that have to do with the case that's ongoing would be. That's a sort of partial answer. And if there's part of your question that I didn't address, please remind me.
No, that's fine. Dr. Green, I think wants to say something as well.
I serve on the Law Enforcement Academy Board, which certifies and decertifies officers who've been accused of misconduct, and we do not see their personnel files, but we do see the complaints that come forward as a result of the investigation of the cases. So we're not looking at their personnel records, we're looking at records that have to do with the cases and the complaints either from the citizens or something that has to do with the case itself. We don't look at their personnel files.
And are you seeing that in concurrence of when the case is in active status, or is it only afterwards?
We're seeing cases that have gone through internal affairs and have now been sent to the Law Enforcement Academy Board to decide whether these officers will continue to be police officers or not.
Okay. And with that in mind, one of the sections here in the ordinance says that jurisdiction of the board shall be concurrent of that in investigations. So how is there protection and integrity of a case if it is being done, if it's being viewed concurrently?
I don't know that it's that's a reactive approach. What we're hoping to do is something that is more proactive, and if there are consistent and continuous complaints for misconduct, especially excessive use of force specifically of officers, we can hopefully avoid the inevitable of an officer, a rogue officer, killing somebody before it happens is what I would like to see. We're not looking to react, but we're trying to be more proactive.
And would that mean that the board would potentially make a decision on an investigation before an investigation is closed out on the city personnel side?
Yes, that's a possibility. I think the broad scope of the board is, as Dr. Green was saying, but in certain situations, yes, that might happen. It might be that they would only give that to the internal affairs investigator for his or her consideration until such time as the city had concluded it. But the board should not have to wait until, what are we looking at with the Baca case? 13 months and counting. While that investigation is still going, the board should not have to wait that long.
And what has happened in your research with, does any other model use this where it's concurrent and that the oversight board determines if somebody is guilty or not guilty before it has been done through due process in the legal system?
I believe so, but I'll try to get you, specific cases.
And then I would like to know the liability risk that these municipalities have had to have. I have strong concerns against this as well.
Concerns against what?
Liability.
I have liability with the concurrent of what is the liability if we have findings before the legal process has been established. And then I would like us to look, excuse me, thank you. The other portion that I have is within the policies and procedures we would need to look at is under section 3.5 is non-interference with administration. We have a significant portion within this about interference, including in personnel matters. I would, if this is to be entertained further, which I am not sure this is the right mechanism for it, I think there will be some issues that we would have to deal with within policies, procedures. However, that is under the purview of our city manager to establish most of those policies and procedures. So then we go back to having to do charter changes and issues. And so that's what I'm saying. I think there's an issue when it works with that.
Could I maybe interject here? There was a young man at a gas station on August 3rd, 2021 named Presley Easy, who was shot execution style in the back of the head by a Las Cruces Police Department officer. And I believe that the assumption on that officer's part, and I can't speak on what his assumption was, but they treated him as if he was just another young black thug. And it's quite the contrary, because this young man was very well connected to the national NAACP, and that is part of the reason that this investigation has taken us to the Department of Justice, because of that particular case and who that young man was. He left a 2-year-old son behind, and he was killed execution style. And so that is part of the problem that we are trying to deal with. We're not trying to violate any officers' rights. We are trying to keep the officers from violating the citizens' rights and or taking their lives.
If I might jump in real quick.
Yes.
Dr. Green, thank you for that. But usually when I have public comment, and I know you're saying that, I ask that no pending litigation issues be brought up. And if you could, please, I mean, you can say generalities, but I would appreciate if you didn't, because that's still in pending litigation.
Thank you. And
absolutely.
I did not bring up pending litigation. What I am working with is within our structures, within our charter and our process that we have here. Yes, you're off microphone again.
I think I'm on now. I just wanted to say that with regard, and I'll read the provision in the policy manual or whatever personally.
And Article 3 within our charter.
And I will read all of that, but from what you're saying, it sounds as if you're equating being able to investigate something and make a recommendation to the city manager or to somebody working under him with interference, and that would kind of negate the possibility of any council, any commissions doing anything if advice were interference. So I will read those though.
Our advice with other boards isn't hiring and firing of city personnel. When we have the quality of life department, I am not giving advice on who to hire and fire. I am not giving advice on who to hire and fire on utilities. I'm not giving advice on who to hire and fire on any of those other boards. This is an entirely new function, which therefore would address in a different way, which is why I'm bringing it up, because I think it has a crucial impact.
Thank you.
The other structure that I had is that of the education function within this policy and procedure. This is one where I am curious on who has developed programs of education, since it seems like one of the duties of this board is to educate the public. Now, what was a little concerning that was just mentioned offhand, I didn't have this in my notes before, but it said that there has been controversy even with how boards have educated the community that has led to issues too. So I'd be curious on what type of budget is done within this education, who makes the curriculum, who decides on the curriculum, and what type of...
I'm sorry, we must have misspoken if we gave you the idea that it was organized in that fashion, that it was a school or had a curriculum or any such thing. Rather, there are controversies that come out, and the public thinks, oh, that's terrible. And in some cases, and you know, I know some of them myself firsthand, not going to get into it here, the officer was correct and had to do certain things. The public doesn't know that. There might be policies that the police department comes out with. One would hope that after some initial reluctance on the part of the police department and perhaps the union, they would work together on some of these issues. But no, it's not a school, and I think the case that Earl was talking about is one member, as could happen here. None of you, of course, but it could happen on a city council that one member would go say something that the rest of the world didn't agree with, and there would be a controversy. Well, that's what happened here. Somebody said something, and there were consequences, but it wasn't as part of any organized curriculum from what they told us.
And I appreciate that with the curriculum, but even like what is handed out, what is given to the public as far as notice, and you mentioned a few.
How would we know that in advance?
Well, that's why I'm asking if we're going to put it in writing, then we probably should know what it is that we're asking to do. If we're going to put it in an ordinance and then it becomes law, then I would like to know what I'm putting into law.
I'm sorry, but with all due respect,
You can feel that way, that's fine, thank you. But it is a question that I have to ask before I make a decision up here on something like that. So thank you so much, sir. And Mayor, my time is up.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Curran?
Thank you. I have sort of two types of questions, a few related to the process of how we might move forward on a few things that have been discussed, and then also on specific actions that I think we can sort of look to, and I'll ask for follow-up from you all and from our city manager to see what opportunities there might be. Related to the process, and this is somewhat to what a number of folks have mentioned here, I'm curious what the next steps for this particular ordinance would be. I think there are some possibilities. It sounds like it definitely needs to have further review from both internal city folks and sort of a feedback loop and some iterations happening. So I think I would be curious to see where this goes. I would say if it went to the Public Safety Select Committee, I would ask that those meetings be open meetings and that the community folks be able to engage in that context. But I think any number of other places are possible. But I do think it also has to go through a few legal reads on our end. So I'm curious about that. I think that's up for discussion here. I have another process-related question related specifically to some of the things that Daniel from the ACLU mentioned. I know that the police have their internal policies and procedures, and I actually know that the use of force policy was really updated most recently in 2021. I'm curious what the typical process for updating internal police processes are, and I think there have been some opportunities for us to have a conversation about how we can do that. So that's one of my questions that I would hope we can answer going forward. And then for action, I am curious because it does sound like as part of what you're proposing or what you're suggesting might be an opportunity. Some of, I think, what you're talking about is related to accountability in the disciplinary process to police. And I do think that we might be functioning under not necessarily all knowing what's happening right now as it exists. So I would ask that we have a work session on the existing police processes, and that includes a couple of things that we have outstanding. Matrix on disciplinary action, which I know that the chief was working on. And also sort of understanding how the use of force cadre and internal affairs interface and could interface with something like either a hybrid model or a civilian police oversight independent model. So I would like to ask that we hear from the police to understand those mechanisms of accountability that exist, so that can also inform whatever we do next at another work session. And then my last action question is related to the OIR contract. I know that we're under a continuing kind of month-to-month contract related to that, but it does sound like there is consensus around including 2 new aspects into our OIR contract. That is one related to some type of community engagement. Your model would include community engagement with a civilian police oversight board, or other models that I think that OIR has enacted. But I would ask that when we revisit the OIR contract, we also, I think the plan is to include use of force, randomly selected incidents of use of force, but I would also ask that in addition to that sampling, we include all, in particular related to some of the things that we've really been talking about here, that the OIR contract include that random sampling of use of force, but also any deadly force use gets referred to OIR as well. So I hope that we could include that as a part of our contract when that happens, so that all of these questions, as when OIR has come, I've heard even Dr. Goodman and Dr. Neeson have asked, why didn't you include this incident that we're referring to? And I hope that we can strengthen that in the contract so that all of those use of deadly force, which may or may not result in death, be included as part of the OIR contract. So those are my questions for follow-up and hope for action that we can sort of have further conversations. And I appreciate you all presenting and considering some of the things questions that I had. I appreciate you answering a lot of those in your presentation, so thank you for that. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me ask some questions, if I may. So on the first, I guess, second page, it has here, all members of the board shall reside in Doña Ana County. Why not City of Las Cruces? So are you saying that we could appoint county residents to a city, Las Cruces Citizens Review Board?
That would certainly be my suggestion. I think there are some people who don't live within the city limits, but are either prominent citizens or otherwise spend a lot of time in the city and have either expertise or experience of the police that would make them good members. So I wouldn't limit it to city, but that's not a decision
I think only ad hoc committees could be allow county resident, ad hoc committees that aren't permanent. I think only permanent city committees, they have to be city residents.
If it has to be city residents, we have no problem with that.
Okay. So on the next page where it says the board shall have the power to investigate, can you expand on that? What power were you all looking for? And what investigate? Investigate what?
Okay. If there would be, let's take an incident that was public and it's been resolved as far as I know, and tell me if you don't want me to discuss the Valenzuela.
You don't have to mention names, just hypothetical, please.
Hypothetically, you have a situation that's resulted in somebody's death, and it raises a lot of implications. It may be that the physical actions taken were appropriate under the, first of all, I would hope the board would investigate training and other matters without a specific incident like that and try to improve upon what we have. But there are fair issues, as I mentioned earlier, about whether to use a particular hold, about what justifies chasing somebody down and perhaps getting in a fight. I mean, it's tough. Some of these officers may be put in a position where they're chasing somebody who hasn't done anything all that bad, but the rules say there's a warrant out on him, I gotta get him, and all of a sudden there's a fist fight and they kill somebody. And that officer may be a perfect, wonderful person and following the rules, or he may not be.
I'll leave it at that, Peter.
Policy issues.
I'll leave it at that so that we can, so I can answer these or get these questions answered and then go move on to the public.
Okay.
One of you said you wouldn't be looking at personnel, and there's a couple things here in item I and J. It says the board shall hold public meetings and shall regularly report to the public on its activities and other policing information it determines to be in the public interest. So I would think that, you know, if there is a situation, it's usually one officer, maybe two, but that's in the public interest. And so how would you not be able to know who that is? This is what I'm trying to get at. Or just the very mere fact of it, I think it discloses who it is. And then it says the board shall use and establish discipline matrix and guidelines to recommend discipline for outcomes resulting from investigations, complaints filed with the board and or LCPD. I think Councilor Abeyta kind of touched on that a little bit. And I have to concur with her that we don't get involved in that. And so for us to provide that type of authority to a board when us ourselves don't have that, not saying that we need it, that's why we have EFO here and him and his management team. So can you expand on that a little bit?
I'll take a look at the provision. I think they should be able to do it. Certainly there should be, or could be, restrictions on publicizing information about specific individuals before the city's made its decision, and perhaps before the courts have. But the investigation ought to begin before that. It doesn't have to all be public. And as I say, in Boulder, they sign confidentiality agreements. Yeah. And what would be covered in that?
I'll get to that one in a little bit.
Okay.
So let's just use a hypothetical. There's a situation that happened. And earlier I thought I heard you say, why does something take so long and you want that information out? Did you say that?
Yeah, I said it ought not to take a year and a month and counting to get some statement from somebody about this is all right and here's why, or we're charging this person, or there's no criminal conduct but we're disciplining this person, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very common for the city to go into protracted litigation that can take 2 to 3 years. So it's almost by the time it's settled, it almost sounds like you want to see the information immediately, and I don't think we can do that. Is that what we're wanting?
I think you probably can do it. I've handled litigation that lasted many, many years.
Okay, so let's just stop right there. So what if that information gets leaked and now they want to sue the board, your board, and the city? Earlier I heard you all talking about wanting to reduce liability by the very fact that someone, and I've seen it happen years ago, that's why I've been hesitant, but who do you expect to pay for the liability, the claim, the $500,000 they're going to sue a board member for?
I know a really good insurance guy we could.
We're not allowed to provide liability coverage for you. That's something there that you would have to take on your own. That's if you didn't go outside your authority.
That's certainly a reasonable question. If you could not provide liability to the members, I gotta guess that's, I know you're brilliant, but I'm sure that question has been raised in other cities, and I appreciate you bringing it up, and I'll try to find out how it's been solved elsewhere.
Yeah, the information that I saw that one of our policy analysts gave, none of them have that authority that you're asking. They're all advisory. They're like, well, these are the recommendations we made, and I don't think they were talking about. But that's okay.
Well, this is advisory too.
Well, yours is a little bit more power there. But that's okay. I just wanted, these are preliminary questions that why I wanted to have our initial discussion first. Yeah, but that's okay. We're good. Let's see here. Where was I? Oh, I think it was Dr. Nason who talked about the budget. It was 50,000 and then 100,000, but I didn't hear the part what OIR charges. Can you talk into the mic, please?
Right now, we're contracted for $75,000, right? For
well, they're gonna want to charge us. Keep in mind, they only come here every 6 months, right, to make a presentation.
Yes, it would probably go up.
And yeah, well, that's why I wanted to know what the price was. If you recall, every time I've mentioned this, over and over and over, I asked you, have you checked the price? So you didn't check the prices what OIR charged extra with these other cities that they have the hybrid model?
Even in Boulder, they're charging by the hour. So they have different kind of contractual arrangements, but I think it was Eureka's budget's $90,000 a year. So when I said 50 or 100,000, it would depend on how many complaints. I mean, if we only have enough for a half-time person, then it'd be 50, I'd be guessing.
Excuse me, I thought the 100,000 was for the ombudsman or person that was going to be leading this. I didn't know that it was for OIR.
That would be the person who is collecting all of the complaints and independently away from the police department and the board. And that person be responsible for making sure that OIR gets all of the complaints. I mean, that's one of our issues here. We're not sure of that. But this person who we'd be paying, let's say full-time 100,000, would have that responsibility in helping them with the investigations with involvement of the board and the police department. Be like a liaison person.
Yes, sir. Okay, so the other thing I want to close with, and I'll turn it back to we'll ask for some public input, is two things. I'm sure you're aware under Chief Dominguez, I think this upcoming graduation in December will be the first of those officers he recruited with special bonuses, $10,000 or $20,000 if you have psychology background or sociology background. That was in response to some of the concerns, and I think they've all agreed that police officers, they're very multi-talented, but to be able to handle other situations, they're not trained in that. So they have some training, but to be able to do that, that's why the chief is focusing on that. That's one item. The other is, and thanks to the Chief Smith and Dominguez and the City Council, really, for funding Project Light, which is now, when you have a situation, you'll have people from the fire department as well as another person who's not a police officer but has that training to hopefully diffuse situations. So you don't think that has shown what the city is trying to do, what the various departments are trying to do to recognize the situations that...
We think those are wonderful.
Yeah. So,
are they all you could do?
But they have, excuse me, but they haven't been given a chance to. They just started. They just started in March 6th, I think, was the first day for Project Light, and so I mean, those are things that, and we're spending we have a good investment in that program, and so I think that is yet another reason why. I mean, it's not like we're just sitting here and not doing anything. The chiefs and the council.
If I may, I think the Project Light is modeled on what Portland has, and Portland has the kind of board we're talking about as well. I mean, obviously, you have your opinion, but my response to what you're saying is those are great things. You people should take credit for them. But to me, it's like saying, well, I swept my house, so, I don't need somebody to clean the windows. I mean, that's a silly analogy, but you have a red alert situation, and you're taking some steps, but there are more that we think you reasonably could and should.
It's kind of like if I swept the house and my wife says, no, we're bringing in professionals who can clean this house, okay? So now I'm going to go to members of the public.
I'm sorry, can I say one more comment before you go to the public? Thank you, sorry for interrupting you. Just want to make sure I get this last word in. First, I also would like to make a couple of asks to you, all of my colleagues, and of course the city manager on continuing this conversation. since I've been on city council, all I've known is for us to fully resource the police department. I think we've increased wages, bonuses, positions, vehicles. I think when PD asks for something, this council has provided it. And so to me, it makes then sense that we get to ask for high standards. And I think it is, to me, it's very clear that clear, rigorous use of force standards protect everybody involved. They protect constituents and they protect officers involved. And I think we, as a city, should be training from the beginning on high standards and maintaining those high standards as their careers continue with the city police department. And not only do high standards of use of force lead to less injury or worse on both constituents and officers, they lead to significantly less liability, public dollars being used for settlements. And so I really feel like there's a pathway forward, and I hope that there's an open and good faith conversation between us, advocates, PD, around how we go about this. Like Councilor Corrin said, I think strengthening our use of force policy is necessary. And I would like to continue having that conversation, whether it's in another work session. I think often what I hear from advocates is that there is a lack of data and transparency. The public feel often in the dark about whether it's in the immediate aftermath of a use of force incident or in general, what is happening with our police department. I think for me, it would be important to better understand the use of force cadre that the police department has implemented. Again, I think while there's obvious things that cannot be shared publicly, I think it's the more we keep things behind closed doors, the more mistrust ensues. And so I think public-facing departments are important to cultivating public trust. And then, of course, yeah, I agree with you, Mayor. I think Project Light is so new and fresh that we have to give it an opportunity to thrive. But that, again, that's a critical piece of the puzzle, because when there's a fire, we send firefighters. When there's a medical emergency, we send paramedics. When there's a mental health crisis, we should send mental health professionals. And I think Police Chief Dominguez has said that significant amount of calls, more and more, to the 911 system are mental health related. And so I think implementing and investing in alternate solutions is critical, and I hope we continue doing that, and I hope we continue to see that project expand in whichever form. And so whether this happens at the next OIR report or sooner, hopefully, I personally want to see those conversations continue to happen. Councilor Corrin and I can continue talking to the city manager, but I at least want a commitment that this conversation will continue, because regardless on whether you fall on the spectrum of you agree with this particular solution or not, the wider conversation around use of force and implementing high standards, I think, is necessary.
Okay, well, see what you started, so Councilor Flores wants to say something.
No, I just want to add, I just want to clarify that our police department does get extensive training. How do I know? I went to one of their training sessions. And I happen to know the attorney out of Los Angeles that does a training, who was a previous police officer, and they are given very clear parameters. And in fact, the fire department was there too. I don't know if Chief was there. I know Chief Dominguez was there. Chief Smith, I believe, was there too. Firefighters were there. But I just want you to know that our police officers do get extensive training. And Missy Olin, the attorney who trained him, is a previous police officer, and it was quite detailed. And just sitting there as a, just as a non-officer, it was exhausting. And believe me, I would never, never, never be a police officer. It's bad enough being, never mind. But I just want you to know that it isn't as if our police officers, and when you think of all the things that can go wrong and do go wrong, we're fortunate that more things don't go wrong. And my humble opinion on that for what it's worth, which is probably peanuts. But from the peanut gallery, I would like to say that there has to be more psychological profiling and assessments as to someone who can really handle that job. I personally, not because I'm only 5'3" and this and that, but psychologically, I wouldn't be able to handle it. You know, even if I were 6'4" and 360 pounds, I wouldn't be able to handle it. So I just want you to know, folks, that it isn't as if the police department is just, you know, having donuts somewhere and kind of just taking off willy-nilly. And we have had very unfortunate situations, without a doubt. But there's so many hours that have to be fulfilled on this, that, and the other. So there you have it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. I want to say a closing comment, and then I'll turn it over to members of the public, because you reminded me of something I thought you were going to mention about when some of us went to the that training at the community college. But earlier, I guess it was probably, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years ago, I was selected to go to the Citizens Academy for the FBI. And so I went to that, and it was 6 weeks. It was great training, and they concluded with this video. I mean, it's so realistic. It's very similar to the one at Doña Ana Community College, but the FBI had their own. And you know, it was incredible. It was so realistic that I could feel my heart pounding. And I was trying to cover my partner, and I tried to shoot him, and I was shooting up into the tree. I told the agent, I said, you know what, I think this thing's not sighted right. He got in and just shot it, and it was sighted right. The difference is I knew I was going home that day. And I knew it was a game. I knew it was a monitor. I knew it was, but it was that realistic. And then fast forward to a few years ago, well, I guess it's been, were you on the council? You had just started the simulator, right. And I was determined. There was some fella got pulled over, and they all got killed, you know, individually. And I was determined not to. So I had my gun out all the time. And I ended up shooting him because he did pull out a gun. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So what I'm trying to say is, you know, and I tell this to the new officers every time, I'm so fortunate that they have accepted the challenge. This job of being a police and a firefighter, first responder, is so difficult because the firefighters see a lot and deal with a lot too, and now they're even under attack. But what I'm trying to say is, I told him, I said, I wish we could pay you triple, quadruple what we pay you. I know it's just a drop in the bucket, and we appreciate what they deal with, because it's almost every day they're out, and you don't know if they're coming home. I lived next door when I was a kid growing up to a Las Cruces police officer. I think a lot of it, I learned a lot. You know, we were just little kids, and Mr. Gonzalez, when he was going on his route, they would all line up, give him a hug and a kiss, and I used to ask him, I said, what are you doing that for? He says, because we don't know if he's coming home that night. This was 1972, 73. Las Cruces was a lot smaller city back then. You know, today it's just, wow, you just don't know. You don't know. I mean, our officers do the best. I say those examples because I'm sure, and then I've come across officers at different departments who unfortunately did take a life, and they were in the right. But it affects them so much forever for the rest of their lives. A lot of times they retire. We forget about the families that were affected on the other side too. I mean, it's a tragedy either way. But I just wanted to say that. And so now I'm going to go to, there was about 7 people who had their hand up. And since the red side won for Chile, I'm going to start on my right, and I'm going to start on the second row. So this gentleman here, we're going to give you 1 minute, sir. State your name and just come forward and give us your what you'd like to say.
Richard Barella. I would like to say that.
I'm sorry, Richard what?
Barella.
Barella, okay.
I'm having concerns about the comments about profiling. I mean, it sounds like a defamation issue that could arise because, I mean, you can create mental illness. I mean, a group of people can create a mental illness in a person just by trying to outwit them when they're under stress from a crime that's been committed, you know? That's my concern. Thank you.
Okay. Next row. Anyone in the third row, fourth row? Yes, ma'am. Yes. You got 1 minute, please. Just state your name.
1 minute?
1 minute. City council talk too much. So just. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start your 1 minute right now, since it doesn't look like you're going to talk. She won't give us. Justin, you don't want to take a picture of this?
If I ever had a chance to speak, you might know that I know something too, but I've never once had a chance.
Yeah, she won't give us her name. Okay, so that was third row. Anyone else on the third row? No? Fourth row? Fifth? Sixth? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, council members, Mr. Mayor. I am a believer.
Can you state your name and speak?
My name is Loretta King, K-I-N-G. I am a believer in community's involvement in our police department. I am a retired California public safety dispatch supervisor. I retired from an agency there. We're in a time when our police department is at issues with a changing society. Oversight through our complaint system, being able to identify problems before they happen is ultimately important. I think that we need to be vigilant. We need to avoid problems before we get them. We shouldn't be in these lawsuits or anything. We should be proactive in avoiding this. Allow the community to speak and to be heard.
Thank you, Ms.
I
King.
have a little bit more, but I'll wait.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to start on my left, and I'm going to start in the back. So that's ninth row, this gentleman all the way in the back, and excuse me, sir, and there's someone right behind you. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, my name is Kenneth Davis. I am a detective with the Las Cruces Police Department, as well as the current president of the Las Cruces Police Officers Association. I just wanted to come up here and let you all know that this is a topic that concerns us very highly, and that we were present here to see all the information that was presented today, just so there was no assumption that we weren't interested in this at all. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your service, Mr. Davis. Yes, sir.
How do you do, Mr. Mayor and councilors? My name is Mark O'Neill. I have a little different model to bring up about an oversight committee. I don't like the word oversight. I don't like we're talking about monitoring the police department, investigating the police department. I like an idea of a committee that involves a couple of counselors, a public safety person, maybe the person in charge of the mobile units that help assist the police department, a couple members of the city council, a couple community members, and 2 members from the police department, including the police chief and his deputy that does the training. A committee, instead of calling it an oversight committee, a group that's a solution to our problem so we can have better policing. That's what we all want. We want the maximum safety for the city. We want better policing. We want less crime. We want less lawsuits. This committee could help with policy and procedures, not investigating. They cannot investigate
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
ongoing litigation anyway.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Okay,
You'll be happy to hear that Mayor Pro Tem Gondara chairs. We have a public safety committee, and then Councilor Vasquez would also give input. A lot of the changes you've seen, a lot is because of the working with our police department, our police chief and such. So thank you for that. So that was the 8th row. Anyone else on the 8th row? 7th row? 6th row? 5th row? You all are the 4th row. Here, the 4th row. Okay, so no one's on the 5th row? Okay, now the 4th row. Is that Rita? I don't know if that. No. The other.
Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Cry, City Council, Mayor, City Manager. I resent the fact that some of you are treating this like they presented something that you're going to vote up or down on. They were trying to come up with a possible solution. Did they not dot an I? Did they not cross a T? So you're going to vote down. You ignored the intent of what they were doing. They were proposing something because the Public Safety Select Committee is private. It's closed. It's not transparent. So let's have transparency. We all care about public safety, the safety of officers, but we have got to communicate, not obstruct.
Okay, so that's still the 4th row. Anyone else on the 4th row? Yes, ma'am.
Mayor and council members and city staff, my name is Jean Berlowitz. I live in District 6, Las Cruces. Following up on what Jen said, I have had no role or involvement in the proposal that was put forward to you today, and I don't know if that's the best solution. As Councilwoman Bencomo has suggested, there are other ways to deal with this. I don't know if the next presentation from OIR will make me feel any better than the last one did, which was kind of like the dance we had at the beginning of this meeting. But transparency, which is a word many people have used here today, is the word that means something to me. And I want to add one new word to it, and that is, because we have no transparency, there's fear. I fear our police, and I know many other people do too, and that's not positive for our city.
Okay, so that's 4th row. I think that's at 3rd row.
Mayor, Council, my name is Rob Wood. My question is, how did we get to this point of considering a Citizen Oversight Committee of Policing? We got here because of people like Juan Garcia of the Coalition of Conservatives in Action that have been repeatedly pointing out at these council meetings for months that we have a council that wants the public to see criminals as a group that has been victims of something created by some social injustice and a desire, and they deserve rights that deny the police of performing their community safety purpose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So how about on the 2nd row, anyone? Oh, Charlotte, were you going to speak? No? Okay. 2nd row. Peter? No? Okay. All right, 1st row. Michael?
Saving the best till last?
Of course.
Thank you. My view is somewhat different from that of the proposals here. I think that while I endorse what they're doing, there's too much attention.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, we didn't get your name.
My name is Michael.
I know he called you Michael, but.
We're giving a lot of attention to excessive force. But I think we're not giving enough attention to the culture which enables these excesses, and in smaller instances infuriate citizens and create distrust. I don't think there will be any police reform until there is moral reform, which means that there has to be honesty at all levels of the legal system. An officer made 5 false charges against me. The city manager agreed that I deserved an apology. He asked me to write it for him. I did. I specifically said I don't want anything that talks about hurt feelings and poor communications. And my response was to get an apology, which was about hurt feelings and communications. This is not the way to treat citizens, to trivialize their complaints. And you omitted this information from an OIR report. The Citizens Review Board is going to get that information out on the street, and we need to do that.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, Mr. Borunda. I just need you to state your name, please.
Paul Borunda. First of all, I want to commend the people here to my right that are proposing solutions for our issues that we're facing, not only in dealing with police, but the whole subject of criminality that no one is addressing, not even the police chief or the Las Cruces Police Department or the city manager or the mayor or the council. You're going to have to face your voters if you continue to find ways or looking for excuses to not listen to what people are saying. That's the problem here. You think you're too important to that you don't have to listen to your citizens that vote for you.
Thank you, Ms. Borunda. Okay, well, that concludes our presentation on the Civilian Police Oversight Commission discussion. I appreciate Dr. Neeson, Dr. Green, and Dr. Goodman for your presentations. The next item is going to be the natural gas and energy line of business story. Looks like Utilities Director Adrienne Whitmer is going to kick this off.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Adrienne Whitmer, Utilities Director. When you all came to us and asked if you would let us know how natural gas is procured, I took it a little bit further and said what a great segue for us to be able to come and talk to you about natural gas and energy line of business. And it's a great opportunity for us to also then let you know that we plan on coming back
on a quarterly basis so that we can go over other lines of business to kind of let you know what utilities is up to. So today we're going to tell you a little bit about natural gas and energy. We're going to tell you about the procurement of how that procurement occurs. We're going to talk about the transition plan and the basic financial benefits. So there's some interesting facts about our natural gas system. It's supplied to city residents and businesses for 87 years, with changes from a private company to an association with the Village of Hatch, and is now a part of an enterprise of utilities department. And as a part of a funded utilities enterprise system, the only money that we bring in for the revenue is the only money that we have to operate and maintain. It's a nonprofit, and anything that is additional is put back into the system, whether it's rehabilitation, operations, or maintenance. And I also have on here that you see the original clean energy with the natural gas vehicles is we've always been visionary, all of utilities, in providing clean, safe, and affordable services. An example is the previous use of the natural gas vehicles and providing a clean natural gas station, of which is now no longer in use as we move forward with our transition. I think another additional example in utilities being visionary, and specifically natural gas and energy, is that they have been sponsoring tasks for work, which is the Waste Management Education Research Consortium. So, and what that is an environmental design contest where university teams throughout the country can participate. And one particular one was converting captured carbon and recycling it into other uses. One team actually utilized the captured carbon dioxide to formulate other chemicals that are used for things like fabric dyeing, leather tanning, resins, waxes, and varnishes. They did so well that that particular university has actually filed a patent. This last year, and I was one of the people that was on the committee for judging on that, was the vehicle to grid resiliency and DERMS, which essentially is distributed energy resource management systems that include load management between user and provider. That was very interesting. So it's really great to see that we've got new and upcoming engineers, scientists, and chemists looking at the same exact issues that we want to work towards as part of our transition. As part of that, we thought we would show you what our natural gas service area is. You can see the outline of the city limits, and our actual natural gas service area is quite a bit larger, and we currently serve both inside and outside of city limits for over 45,000 customers. And so as part of our large customers, we actually have 12 industrial customers. Here's our 10 largest customers. We're starting with 1 through 5, and they're not in any particular order. But we're just showing that because not they're not all industrial. Like obviously the city of Las Cruces is not industrial, nor is Memorial Medical, but some of the other ones are. And here just happens to be the other 10, or the other 5. Can I count today? And with that, I would like to turn it over to Ramiro Piera. He is our interim natural gas deputy director.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Ramiro Piera once again. I'm the interim deputy director for natural gas and energy. Okay. The natural gas and energy line of business maintains 1,011 miles of gas lines. This includes gas service lines to the customer meters, gas mains feeding the service lines in the road typically, and 2 transmission lines. Our pressures range from 1/4 PSIG, which feeds homes, to 837, which is our transmission lines that are being fed from a Paso natural gas pipeline. Our sizes range from half-inch polyethylene to 12-inch steel lines. We maintain about 91 regulator stations that reduce pressure from our transmission lines to our distribution line systems. We have approximately 57 employees plus 4 contract positions. We are regulated by what we call FSMA, which is the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, through the New Mexico Public Regulatory Commission. The line of business of programs for our administration, construction, maintenance, and corrosion, pressure and service, compliance and regulation, and training, and energy management. We went ahead and put some pictures here of the programs doing everyday work. The pressure and service program do routine maintenance on the regulatory stations. The construction, maintenance, and corrosion do welding work, and a picture of the compliance, regulation, and training inspectors. Here are some awards that the natural gas line of business has received in the last 5 years. The American Public Gas Association System Operating Achievement Recognition Program, which is a SOAR. In 2019 and 2020, we achieved the bronze level. And in 2021, we achieved the silver. The SOAR program honors natural gas distribution utilities that demonstrate commitments to excellence in 4 areas: system integrity, system improvement, employee safety, and workforce development. In 2022, we received the Safety Management Excellence Award. This award was given to APGA members that consistently operate at a high safety level, clearly establishing the system as an achiever of excellence in the field of safety management. On April 5th of this year, we had the opportunity to meet U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg at a project site here in Las Cruces, where the gas utility was abandoning the gas line. At this meeting, I was informed about being awarded $10 million in grant money. This is part of the Natural Gas Infrastructure Safety and Modernization Grant Program. This grant funding provides monies to repair, replace, and rehab existing pipeline infrastructure. And now I'll turn it over to Mario Fuentes.
Thank you.
Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Councilors, City Manager, good afternoon. My name is Mario Puentes, and I serve as the gas business analyst at Las Cruces Utilities. One of the responsibilities of my office is to manage the natural gas supply and transportation contracts that bring natural gas to our city. And so I am prepared to provide you an overview of what that activity entails. So we have 3 natural gas suppliers in the city. We have Shell Energy North America, we have the New Mexico Energy Acquisition Authority, and the Public Energy Authority of Kentucky. The NEMEA, the New Mexico Energy Acquisition Authority, was created by the city of Las Cruces and the city of Gallup via a joint powers agreement in 2007. The peak entity was created in 1998 by 2 Kentucky cities, the city of Henderson and the city of Carrollton. Both of those supply agreements that we have with them are what we call prepay agreements. And that is because both NEMEA and PEAK issued tax-exempt bonds and then remitted the proceeds from the sale of those bonds to a supplier in exchange for a 30-year supply of natural gas. And because the supplier was paid up front and it was a big pile of money, they're able to generate a discount from the monthly market price of gas. And so as of April 2023, that discount amounts to about $3.6 million that has circulated in the Las Cruces economy. Now, it's not that big relative to over the years how much we spent on gas, but it's still money that stayed in Las Cruces and not paid out to an out-of-state corporation. When the city entered into both the PEAK and the NEMIA agreements, we agreed to buy a specific quantity of gas every day for the term of the agreement. And it's broken out by month. For example, in January, we buy like 3,100 decatherms a day from PEAK and 1,485 from NEMIA. And it also stipulates that the price will be the monthly index price out of the San Juan Basin. And so then going back up then to the Shell contract, the supply contract with Shell, we kind of term it a swing agreement. And that is because we know exactly how much gas we're going to be buying from PEAK and NEMIA. And so then Shell provides the remainder of our requirements. So we're in essence swinging into Shell. So that's the only reason we call it a swing agreement. And then I'll talk about the services agreement shortly. I think that's all. Okay. So we buy gas on a monthly basis and also on a daily basis. So about 1 week before a particular month begins, we submit our order to Shell. That is what we call the first of the month order. I have the acronym here, FOM. That is a term widely used, and it relates to both the monthly order and also to the first of the month price. We send them a letter, and we are very specific as to how much gas we are committing to buy for the coming month. We also are specific as to where we want that gas sourced from. And then as the month rolls out, in the wintertime, we frequently make changes because as the temperatures, we have what they call a temperature-sensitive load. We'll make changes throughout the month. That monthly order volume is priced based on a monthly published index price out of the either San Juan Basin or Permian Basin, depending on where we are sourcing the gas, unless we have put a hedge on that gas or on the price. And then changes that we make throughout the month or during the month, those are priced according to a published daily index. And we do hedge our prices for gas deliveries in future months. And we generally do that for the heating season, namely November through March. And we do that, our kind of what we have done in the past few years is we do it in multiple transactions. For example, if we had established a target of, say, locking in 60% of what we're going to use in January, we might break that out into 3 different transactions, so we'll pick a day when the market is giving us an opportunity to lock in a portion of that, and then on a different day, we might do another 20% and so forth. And the number one reason for doing that, at least from my perspective, is that we absolutely avoid picking the worst day to hedge your gas. So if we all did it on one day, and that just kind of ended up in retrospect being the worst day to do that. So we reduce that risk, and we also are able then to study the market and not ever be hurried to do this. Now, if we jump over there to the transportation side of the industry, 100% of the natural gas that is delivered to the city is done by the El Paso Natural Gas Pipeline Company, or EP&G. And in contrast to the commodity market, specifically the prices, where there is no regulation on pricing, EP&G's rates and its operating terms and conditions are approved and regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or the FERC. The agreements that the city has with EP&G specify how much capacity we have on the pipeline, basically how much space we have in it to transport our gas. And then it's further broken down into whether we can, it's broken down into the San Juan and Permian basins. Our capacity is about 55% out of the Permian Basin and 45% out of the San Juan. Day-to-day business on El Paso, on EP&G or El Paso or the pipeline, I use those terms kind of interchangeably. You have to nominate your gas or your gas requirement, and to do it timely, you do it one day ahead of time. So for example, this morning, we nominated how much gas we want for tomorrow. And so once that is entered into the system, then there's what they call a confirmation on both the receipt and delivery side. Once it enters the EP&G computer system, then it goes through various cycles. And the EP&G is evaluating, your contracts. It's also evaluating the pipeline conditions. Are all the paths clear, and so forth and so on. So by tomorrow evening is when we will get a report from EP&G indicating how much gas was actually scheduled. That's important because that is the number that we are credited with having put on the pipeline, and it's basically the book of record. So the services agreement with Shell authorizes it and actually obligates it to make the nominations for us. So when we sent them that order prior to the beginning of the month, they know exactly how much gas we have committed to purchasing. So basically, they just take that quantity divided by the number of days in the month, and they're making those nominations on the EP&G system. And they are also authorized to do other functions. Sometimes we may owe the pipeline physical gas, or they may owe us gas, and so we'll work with Shell and ask them to pay back the gas or take the gas. And we're looking at pricing. We're looking at all kinds of other things that are going on. And so, and they also are able to, at times, post some of our capacity that we're not using. And if somebody else can use it, that can mitigate some of our transportation costs. So in the summertime, we kind of take advantage of that opportunity, especially over the last couple of years where the pipeline was really constrained. So there were some entities that wanted some capacity, and so we were able then to mitigate our transportation costs. This last bullet just pertains to, there are times when the company, EP&G, will declare what they call an operational flow order. So once they do that, then that basically turns on their penalty structure. And so we need to pay attention when that's happening. And so that's when things get a little bit anxious, or the market gets anxious. So this chart shows you the transportation capacity we have on the pipeline. So you can see the profile there. That's what they call a seasonal profile, where we have more capacity in the wintertime, and then it kind of drops down into the summertime and then picks back up. And I've further broken down into the Permian and San Juan by just the color shading. So the way this works is, like, if we focus in on January, we have close to 35,000 decatherms of space on the pipe to move our gas. And so we reserve that capacity by paying a reservation fee, and it doesn't matter how much of that we're using, we need to pay for that. And one thing that I guess would be good information is that we hammered this capacity out about 20 years ago, and it was a regulatory process where the El Paso's contractual systems and its operating terms and conditions were really restructured by the FERC. And so we would have liked to have seen higher numbers in the wintertime and smaller capacity higher in the winter, smaller in the summer. Especially if you notice the big drop there from February to March. that is not reflective of how our load works, but this really is the product of negotiations that took a couple of years to finally get through. This is a chart of the entire pipeline capacity. So this is EPNG's capacity that is fully subscribed. This represents about 5 million decatherms a day. And the biggest holder of that capacity is the WB section. That stands for within basin. That's kind of in the area surrounding both the Permian Basin and San Juan Basin. There are communities and cities close to it that are subscribed for that capacity for delivery for their use, but there's also big holders of capacity like British Petroleum, Chevron, and Conoco that have access then to the plants, to the processing plants, and then they take that gas off to what they call the scheduling pools, and then off to other pipelines that are taking the gas either east or west. And then, of course, you see California is a big holder of capacity, and so is Arizona. Las Cruces, we have about 1% of that capacity. And so you can see that it is, the point for putting this here was that it is fully subscribed, and all this gas was flowing in the wintertime. There wasn't any idle capacity. This is an overview of the EPNG system. I'd like to bring your attention to the lower right-hand part of the screen there. So there's where the Permian Basin is located, like West Texas, eastern New Mexico area. And then you have the San Juan Basin up there in the Four Corners area. The EPNG system is broken up into two main segments. You have the north main line and you have the south main line. The south main line somewhat parallels Interstate 10. And then you have the north system that parallels closely to Interstate 40. So our capacity in the Permian Basin is then further broken down into pools. So I said that we have about 55% of our total capacity is out of the Permian Basin. And then it's further broken down into what they call the Keystone Pool and the Waha Pool. And those are just instruments that were created in order to facilitate scheduling. And then the capacity then is, our capacity then is further broken down into paths as to how you can get the gas to Las Cruces. From the Permian Basin, there's only one path. It exists on the south system, and we are on the south system, so basically it's kind of like a south-to-south system, pretty straightforward. But when you go to the San Juan Basin, since it is on the north main line, there are 4 different paths that are allocated to Las Cruces is how we can get gas here. So the gas can flow from the San Juan Basin down into the north main line and actually head eastward until it meets up there with into the Permian Basin area and then come back to Las Cruces. Or you can head westward and you see 3, so I apologize for that. You see 3 connecting pipes connecting the north to the south system. So it can flow down that way. So there are times when there's pipeline maintenance going on, force majeures, all kinds of things that make it challenging to get the gas here. And I think one final point I wanted to make here was those little oval markers along the line, along the pipes. Those are the compressor stations. So that's basically big facilities compressing that gas, 800 pounds, 900 pounds, up to 1,000 pounds per square inch, making that gas flow. One other point on this chart is even though it shows your north main line and your south main line being kind of like one solid black line, they are really made up of multiple pipes. So it is not just one big pipe flowing up there. There's 4 or 5 big pipes flowing, moving that gas. Now we get to the cost of gas. So the cost of gas is a pass-through charge to all our natural gas customers, and it is made up of 2 components: the cost that we pay to suppliers and the cost that we pay to the transportation pipeline. And it changes from month to month. based on the market. Prices go up and down, and that's what we're buying. And then interstate pipeline conditions, the pipeline has a tremendous impact on prices. And it is not just the EPNG line, there's other pipelines in the Southwest that also impact market commodity prices. So I covered that our contracts have a first of the month pricing stipulation unless we have hedged that price. So here's a picture of about a year and a half of what that monthly price looked like, starting with January of 2022 through now. And so you see that 2022 was starting, it kind of stayed in the $5 range up until May. And then as the cooling season put a lot of demand on the pipes, you see some prices going up in the summer, and then you see it kind of settle down pretty, I guess, to an acceptable level there in October and November. And then it took a big jump from November to December, a $5 jump, which was a 100% increase at that point. And then it just skyrocketed in January. And that is what, that's where I guess the financial pain came in with that price there in January. And then it quickly dropped down in February to where it was in December. And then you can see it now, it's back down to the $3 range in the San Juan Basin and $1.50 or so in the Permian Basin. This is a very similar chart, except this is the daily prices. But the relationship is, you can probably overlay one with the other, and you could see the close relationship. And then as we get the big volatility timeline here is in December. That's where you see the prices get up there to close to $50. And as the suppliers were lining up their supply for January, that's the prices that were being commanded, and so that's kind of what established that first of the month price into January of $33. So these are some of the bullet points that we were reading about, and of course we were definitely privy to some of it. But that was a sustained colder than normal weather in the West, including the Pacific Northwest and obviously in California. So this led to high gas demand for both heating and for power generation. And then there was also reports that there was less gas flowing from Canada down to Northern California. And part of that was related to the fact that the Pacific Northwest was so cold that it was taking a lot of the gas that would normally make it down to Northern California for power generation and for storage replenishment. And so another factor was storage levels in California, driven in part by the prolonged droughts that we have had, so that reduces river flows, reduces hydroelectric generation, so they switch over to natural gas, and so California was not only bringing in gas for their current heating and power generation, but also to replenish their storage facilities. And then, of course, we had the EPNG line 2000 force majeure that was out, basically put that pipeline out of service from August of 2021 until February 15, 2023. So that limited Permian gas flow, Permian Western gas flow. And so it was the San Juan Basin that had to kick in and fulfill the demands that were being put on it. And it raised the price to a historic level. I've never seen it a price that high in our area at $33. So finally, that gets us to what our customers saw in January. This is how we calculated their cost of gas rate. So you see there rows 1 and 2, that's the San Juan gas. And one of the things I wanted to point out here was that we did not buy a single decatherm out of the San Juan Basin that we were not contractually committed to doing so. And so everything else then is out of the Permian Basin. And another point I wanted to make here is that we have from row 4 to row 7, those are the different layers of fixed prices that we had out of the, that we had executed in 2022. So had we locked in all our gas on the first time we had an opportunity, it would have all been at 753 as opposed to blending in 753, 661, 712, and 590. So that kind of reduced the, so that reduces the risk of just picking the highest day that you do this. And then, of course, the last component there on row 9, that's the EP&G transmission charges and fuel charges that we pay to the pipe to move that gas. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, and I am finished.
Gosh, Mario, this was a master's dissertation. This was really good. Thank you. Yes, Councilor Flores has a question.
I have a question. So what does it mean then to have a fixed price if it goes all the way from, $32 down to $5.90? So what's the fixed, if it's a fixed price, why is there that variance? Does it have to do with the seasonal stuff? No?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, no. So what I'm showing here is these are all the packages of gas that we had lined up for January. And so both the peak and the NEMEA gas is not hedged. So we're buying 96,100 decatherms from peak at the market price of $32.77. And then NEMEA, we're buying 46,000 at the market price of $32.80. And then line 3, we're buying 153,574 at the market price Permian. And so that was the market price of the Permian Basin. And then the remaining ones, we fixed those prices, but it's a culmination or it's a summation of all this costs that make up the rate. So we paid peak $3.1 million for its gas. There you see on the amount side, on the amount column. So to be clear with that, Councilor Flores, we did not hedge the peak and the NEMEA gas. We do not have an instrument currently to hedge that gas. We're working on it, but we don't have a way to hedge that gas currently.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Councilor. Natural gas, I think, is sold much like a stock on the New York Mercantile Exchange or something like that, and the price is changing, so the city will buy just like anything else. They think, hey, this is a good price, but we'll buy so much of it, and then sometimes it goes up and down, up and down. It's kind of tricky. That's why we have a businessman running that part.
Thank you all. Adrian Widmer, Utilities Director. So now let's talk a little bit about the transition plan. So we've got a draft RFP. We have it turned into SAC so that we can get a review on that, and once it's okay, it'll go ahead and it'll hit the streets. So based on that, we are certainly hoping that we get it out on the streets, get those back probably around June, and perhaps, depending upon how we decide to actually end up doing the SAC, because we may end up doing interviews depending on who is proposing. So it may take a little bit longer, but we're certainly hoping to get a notice to proceed done as soon as possible. And so, with the adoption of Elevate in 2020 and the comprehensive plan by City Council, and the Climate Action Plan is when you all approved the Resolution 21-153 in 2021 for the Energy Transition Plan. As part of that, in 2022, when you all approved the rates, that included the decarbonization rider, and it's the proceeds from that decarbonization rider that's actually now at a high enough level to actually fund the transition plan. And this just kind of gives you a basic overview of what the scope of work is going to be. Obviously, it's going to be much more detailed than this, but this just kind of gives you an overview of what we're planning to do with the transition plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Dominique for financial information.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council members. My name is Dominique Rodriguez, the Assistant Utilities Director. So this slide kind of talks about some of the financial information for the Utilities Department as a whole, and then shows the gas portion of it. Franchise fees are paid to the city, which is 2% of our sales. The Utilities Department pays almost $2 million in franchise fees. Of that, the natural gas portion is about $574,000. Admin fees are also paid to the city, which come downtown and pay for support services that are housed here, which is HR, IT, risk, those type of things. So Utilities Department for fiscal year 2023, we paid about $3.2 million. And the natural gas portion of that was a little bit over $832,000. We also have within our Utilities Department ancillary services. These are housed in our Shared Services Fund, and this includes components like our customer service, billing receivables, Office of the Director, so any kind of lines of business or programs that actually support each utility as a whole. So that Shared Services Fund for fiscal year 2023, was about $18.3 million. Of that, natural gas's portion of that was over $5 million. The next slide talks about our current bond rating. So we are rated, at AA2. That is one below the highest bond rating level, and we are. Our debt is issued out as a joint utility system, and that is outlined in the master ordinance, which was approved with ordinance number 1593. And basically what that means is the master ordinance pledges revenues as a system, so the system being gas, water, and wastewater. However, each utility pays its own debt individually. So if water needed a bond or a loan to go out to help with capital projects, the system is looked at as a whole in terms of revenues, but water will only pay for that debt that's tied to that. Adrian talked about the transition plan, and so to move away from this master ordinance, it would have to be amended. We did talk to the bond council. They did let us know that that rating will go down, and they're actually running numbers for us to know what that would be specifically for water, wastewater, and then gas itself. So we are talking with them to see what that would do. On the right-hand side, it talks about debt service coverage. Excuse me. For 2022, our debt coverage ratio as a system was 1.64. And we, within our rates, we tried to get our debt coverage per each utility at 1.3. So 1.64 means that we can cover 1.64 times of that debt. Or it says you can pay your debt one time, and you have 64% of your income left over to pay your other bills. So a 1.2 is good. We imposed a 1.3, and then the 1.64 is that much better for us as a utility. And that's all I have on financials. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique.
So just our final thoughts, excuse me. Energy is used and it does affect all lines of business, and natural gas is currently our only method of emergency power. So and that emergency power is what makes sure that our wells, our boosters, our lift stations, and wastewater plants can continue to function if in fact there's a power outage. We're hoping through our transition plan and as other energy sources become developed over the next few decades, that we would be able to continue to transition. But at this point in time, and we're not sure how far that is, that should be something that could be covered in the transition plan, is to actually utilize the natural gas for emergency power until we can actually utilize something else different. And so essentially, you know, thank you for letting us have this discussion with you all on the line of business of natural gas. And it's really exciting for us. And we definitely look forward to any questions. And then we look forward to coming back to you probably here in about 3 months so that we can cover another line of business for you. And with that, we'll stand for any questions or not. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrian. Councilor Bencomo.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you so much to the whole LCU staff that are here today with this presentation. I wish people would have stayed. I find every time you all present incredibly interesting. So, and again, I always make sure I say this because I feel often like the folks who work at utilities, no matter what line of business it is often a really invisible job, yet such an important job about how we cook and how our water is warm in the mornings, right? And so I just always want to express my gratitude toward all of you and the immense staff that the LCU has. I did want to note that I'm excited about the transition update, Adrian. I'm really looking forward to seeing that evolve. One of the things I didn't notice specifically mentioned in the scope, and something that I care deeply about, is ensuring that in whatever transition, whatever that looks like and however long it looks like, that you don't lose staff, that staff remain a priority, that transition bring people, that they train people, right? Like, I just want to make sure that the people who have worked in this industry for years are able to continue to do so if they want to. And so for me, that's something that's a critical piece that anybody, if you're doing interviews, that I hope that you ask. And then, you know, really, I think it was on page 17 with the graph. To me, this really is one of the biggest reasons that, no, actually, that's not page 17. Can you do where the January was like way up here? To me, this is really the graph that kind of explains why we need to transition so badly, why we need to find alternatives and prepare for alternatives, because we're kind of beholden to this system, and our folks saw this huge increase in their bills, and it's time that we start doing that, and we put urgency, you know, behind policies and legislation, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, that will help us find alternatives faster. But I certainly think it's important that we do it responsibly and don't leave anyone behind. So I didn't really have any questions, but I just wanted to make that statement, Adrian, and thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Abeyta.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to all the LCU staff. I also want to recognize Commissioner Little in the audience, so thank you as well for being here. Really, it's such a thorough presentation, so thank you. The one question that I have is in regards to that $10 million grant that we were able to receive. And with that, we know that we need to do some line replacement. Do we have an estimate about what that looks like, about what the immediate need is for our lines already?
Mayor, Councilor Abeyta, Adrian Wimmer, Utilities Director. What's really great is that particular grant had specific projects associated with it. And so Romero's group did an excellent job. And so they actually told them there was 2 projects that were cut. And so the nice thing is the rest of those that were cut from that, we're taking a look at it. If you want to come up and chat a little bit more about it, Ramiro, is that they are actually going through, and whatever their top priorities are, they're going through that to find how the $10 million works the best.
Great.
And it is through a priority process. And thank you. And it is for modernizing it, for rehab, that kind of stuff. It's not for new.
Yes, and thank you for that distinction. I know that that's been a priority to make sure that we don't add new lines, but I know how important it is to take care of the lines that we do have and to make sure we have those correct pressures for safety. So I just want to make sure that as we balance it, we're also recognizing that while we do have these lines, that we are very much responsible for that safety.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. One thing to point out, and I think you heard Adrian talk about backup or emergency. So during the winter time, when the gas spiked up, if there's no sun, then they need the gas to generate the power to generate the electricity. So I think that's where they got Texas big time. So. Okay, well, thank you again very much. That was pretty impressive. Ifo, you think that might be something council can have access to, and that might help their constituents later down the road to explain how that came about? Okay, thanks. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, last item is going to be the ground ambulance transport update. Looks like Chief Smith is out there.
Oops.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor, members of City Council, Fire Chief Jason Smith. Today I'm going to be providing to you a ground ambulance transport update. We're going to go through a few things that we've been working on for the last several years at LCFD. So we're going to cover some of our certificate of necessity background, where we've been in the last 40, 50 years or so. Review our settlement agreement progress. Basically, we had a mediation settlement with the county and American Medical Response, and we have some things that we need to implement to stay in line with that settlement agreement, and we'll cover those. We'll also go over the current system performance, and then we'll talk about ambulance transport billing at LCFD. So if you go back in time, when we looked at this for the Health Policy Review Committee, the earliest resolution I could find was from 1977, when the city was contracting out ambulance services to two different companies, Consolidated Ambulance and Associated Ambulance. Through the 70s and 80s, there were numerous contracts that were either performed by the city or by the county or jointly. The last one being in 1989, where MMC was providing EMS transport, the city was providing maintenance on the ambulances and a fee per call, and the county was providing ambulances, the capital for those. Going into the 90s, in 2018, Doña Ana County had the sole certificate of necessity for the area. They were issuing the contracts, managing those contracts, and the performance. At the same time, LCFD started providing EMS care. So in the 90s, we started training EMTs, so we started going more and more into the EMS realm. In 2006, we had our first paramedic class graduate, and now I'm happy to share that out of the 163 sworn personnel we have, 51 of those are paramedics. And we've got a few more coming. They're working on their testing and their certification. So 2006, we started adding paramedics. Shortly after, we added our squad program to start supplementing the system. And along the way, we started noticing that there was a decrease in the level of service we were receiving under those contracts. Sometime in 2015, the issuance of that, we had an increase in call volume, increase in population, and at the same time, we were seeing an increase in our response times from the contracted service. So we went from a contract in 2007 that required a response within 8 minutes and 59 seconds. That was changed to 10 minutes and 59 seconds in 2015, and that's currently the contract we work under. So in 2018, we brought to City Council a work session in December, followed by Resolution 19112, asking for us to be given the direction to pursue our certificate of necessity. So we wanted to have more influence in that contract, and we wanted to make sure that our needs in our strategic business plan were being meant to or spoken to. So we started our CON process. It was quite lengthy. In March of 2020, we filed. Shortly thereafter, there was a protest by AMR and Oneida County. By July, we had negotiated a settlement agreement, and those protests were withdrawn. That resulted in a settlement mediation, 2 phases. The first phase, that we would keep our CON and we wouldn't transfer it to anybody. Basically, we wouldn't contract out services. And we were also allowed to provide transport under certain circumstances. So if we were expecting the AMR ambulance to be longer than 11 minutes to scene, we could dispatch our squad to provide transport. Also, if we were already on scene and there was a life or limb issue, or we already had a patient who was under MIH, so mobile integrated healthcare was already seeing that person, we could provide transport. And then if they needed paramedic care and AMR was not able to provide that, we could. The other thing that we agreed to in that resolution was we would have matching tariff rates, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. The second phase of this settlement agreement, we are to enter into an MOU with the county for 9 years. It's renewable every 3. Currently, we have that at legal for review, so we're close to having that implemented. The city will manage services or contract out services for ambulance for the entire county. We'll also work at supporting each other when we reissue or reapply for our CON. And then we did a competitive request for proposal together with the county. And a part of that is the county is to pay for any subsidy related to that RFP if it's needed. So I'm happy to say that we have issued that RFP, and we're close to entering into negotiations next month with the selected contractor. The county did just renew their certificate of necessity this past year, and to the settlement agreement, we didn't file any kind of disagreement with it. We supported their reissuance. We're also going to be forming an ambulance oversight committee. This is very similar to the one that we have now. It's made up of first responders, so area fire departments, the county, some of the hospitals, and we're going to be looking at expanding that committee so that all the hospitals have representation, as well as the local departments, our first responders who are usually first on scene. The objective of that is to review response times and look at clinical interventions, and if there is any impact or penalty that we need to charge to the selected contractor, that approval goes to the ambulance oversight committee, and then we administer that. And we're looking at operations under this new agreement to start at the beginning of next year. So our current system performance, we're looking at our ambulance review committee, which is kind of the mirror of our ambulance oversight committee. This one is managed by the county and overseen by them. They looked at response times from July through December of last year. AMR had just over 3,500 responses within the city. Their benchmark time, they're supposed to be at the 85th percentile, responding and being on scene within 10 minutes and 59 seconds. They achieved just under 65% during that time frame. They also had almost 5% of their calls took greater than 21 minutes to respond. And these are only calls where they're responding lights and sirens. So that's what we determine as code 3. For the city response times, we looked at 2 different groups. We looked at our squad program to report those benchmarks. We did not have 3,500 calls for that. Sorry, that's from the other slide. We had somewhere in the realm of just over 1,000 calls that were code 3, lights and sirens. At the 1059 benchmark, our squads were on scene at 84.5%, engines and trucks at 94%. And then within our strategic business plan, our goal is to be on scene within 9 minutes. The squads achieved that 73.5% of the time, and our engines and trucks just below 88%. Now, in order to address some of our increasing response times, we're looking at Fire Station 9, which will have an engine and a truck and a squad. And we've also implemented a peak hour demand unit at Station 8. We're running an extra squad. So we actually have, during the day, during our peak hours, 4 squads in service. And we're hoping we can meet our strategic plan goal numbers here shortly. Just to look at the number of ambulance transports that we've provided, in 2022, we did 4,600 transports to the hospital from scene. And year to date so far in 2023, we're just over 1,800. A look at our response times overall. We've got a pretty good distribution of what we'd like to see. I know it's very hard to really see that on the screen, but the far left of the graph is 0 seconds to respond. Far right is just over 29 minutes. So you can see the greatest concentration of our responses are right in between 3 minutes and 20 seconds and about 8 minutes. Now, our system has been changing and getting busier year after year. I'm coming up on 21 years with the department, and back in 2002, we were excited to just get to about 11,000 calls. Now we're close to 22 to 24,000 calls in our system. And it's not just the city of Las Cruces that is busy, it's the entire county area. And I'm hoping this will pull up a map from GIS. So definitely put our GIS department to the test this last week. We asked them for a chart with all of our call volume over 2018 to 2022 on there, and they put it up on a nice video that showed it. Trust me, it's awesome. It does things here in the middle and then shows calls happening, but I don't know the password for the presentation. So, does anybody? Oh, all right. No password? I love fire department. So we'll skip that one. Take Tibor's word for it, Battalion Chief Coaches. It's great. But basically, off of all the data that we looked at for those 4 years, we can see what our peak times are. Basically, 8 o'clock in the morning to about 8 o'clock at night is when our system within the entire county really peaks. We see a lot of call volume overall. Overnight hours, which you'd expect, lower calls for service. Here is just a screen capture of the video where you can see the highest density is within the city of Las Cruces, extending out to the ETZ area. Some call volume up in Hatch, down to Oregon, Sunland Park. But we came up with 4 main areas that see the most call volume. So billing for LCFD, this is part of that resolution 21090, where we have to implement matching tariffs. We've contracted out for a third party to administer our billing. That's EMS Management Consultants. And they are working with us to go through CMS to register us to bill with them and private insurance companies. Part of that process, we talked about how do we have relief for hardships. So we have anywhere from 0 to 150% at the poverty level. You can see 100% reduction in your personal billable account, all the way up to 300%. And we have payment and billing options that break down that bill to smaller chunks that can be paid over time. So here's an example of that hardship. So if you have a family of 4, the latest federal poverty level is $30,000 in household income. If you're at that level for your household, you'll have a 100% reduction in your payable bill. All the way up to $90,000 for income, which honestly covers almost all of your city employees, you have a 25% reduction in your bill. And here are our tariff rates. There are other ones for non-emergency transport, but the one that we're focused on, LCFD, is our 911 calls. So Advanced Life Support 2, this is when paramedics get on scene and we have to do a higher level of intervention, as well as administer 3 different advanced life care medications or the same one 3 times. So this is like a CPR. So when we get on scene and we're starting CPR, we're gonna do an airway, an advanced airway to secure that so we can ventilate the patient. We're gonna administer things like epinephrine, and we do that multiple times over the call. That gets billed at an Advanced Life Support 2. Advanced Life Support 1 is an intervention from an advanced EMT or a paramedic where we give 1 medication or 1 intervention. Our basic life supporters are basic EMTs providing intervention, and then we also have a fee for just a patient evaluation. So a lot of times we get called, the patient doesn't require transport or they don't want to be transported. For any medications or interventions we do on scene, we will bill that. So leading up to this, we're looking at a July 1st implementation of sending out our bills. We're going to look at education for the public, which is going to be updates on social media, our webpage, also some outreach. We plan on leaving pamphlets or flyers behind all of our EMS calls, letting them know what our tariffs are, who to get a hold of, what the bill will look like, so they can expect because it's not going to match city PO boxes. It's going to be for the billing company. It's going to look a little bit different, but it will have our new logo on there and identified as being from the Las Cruces Fire Department and the City of Las Cruces. We've also done training for our staff. EMS MC provided online training for all of our personnel, and they're making their way through that course, and it's about a 2-hour course online. So into the future, that new ambulance RFP, that contract in place January 1st, 2024. We're going to be looking at about a year after that, hopefully opening Station 9. We're looking at pursuing automatic aid agreements, most definitely with the county, as we try to partner more and more with them as we are managing this contract and this service together. Also with NMSU, MESIA, any of our neighbors nearby, and looking at ways to create innovation and new programs for the city. So if we start to recover some revenue and we see that coming in, what I propose is that we reinvest that back into the department rather than supplementing or removing general funds entirely, that we say, how can we support the MIH program? How can we fund LIGHT project on an ongoing basis? And as we receive more revenues or even cost sharing through CMS or Medicaid, that we put that back into these programs to grow them and meet the need for the community so that we can work on the prevention side of what we'd like to do when it comes to prevention, response, and recovery. So in conclusion, this is a pathway that we've been on from the city for many years, as you can see, going back to the 90s when we first started training EMTs, to our first paramedic class, the squad program, going for a certificate of necessity. That is a hard one for me to say at the end of the day. Certificate of necessity. And now to going into billing and managing the RFP for the entire county. It's really only possible because of our membership and our firefighters that respond to these calls. I value what they do and their dedication to integrity, customer service, and teamwork. So we look forward to trying new and inventive things and to bring further updates to council. And with that, we'll stand for questions.
Thanks, Chief. Okay, who? Councilor Graham? Councilor Bencomo?
Sure. Good. Thank you so much. Thank you especially for that really tricked out map. I saw it in my head. It was beautiful. I know you mentioned briefly, but I didn't see it covered. Can you talk a little bit about non-emergent transport, the burden that can put on the system, and how this new strategy might help to address that?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor Graham. You're referring to interfacility transports from hospital to hospital and hospital to home?
Correct, or I'm thinking to facility to hospitals, so maybe some of our senior care centers, rehabilitation centers, so thinking more about that facility to facility transport.
Okay, thank you. That is a concern because when units come out of service from the 911 system to facilitate those transfers, it does reduce what we have available for 911. Conversely, though, it does move people in and out of the hospital system, so it could be freeing up a bed, a spot in the emergency room as patients shuffle through the hospital. So you go from emergency room to bed on the floor, from bed on the floor to recovery or rehab hospital. It does move patients around. One thing we were aware of when we issued the RFP is there are facets of the RFP that speak to performance when it comes to IFT. And some of the penalties we put in place or propose putting in place address the 911 performance. So we're aware of the impact of that, but when we look at the healthcare system and needing ground ambulance transport, it's kind of a 30,000-foot look that we have to have for it.
Okay, thank you. Is that something for which we could bill under this? Would that be included in the tariffs?
So under our settlement agreement, IFTs are not a key feature of what we're looking to do at the city. We're focused on 911 response. I will say that we've put the IFT as a sole provider into the RFP and proposed that as part of the contract because those revenues should reduce the cost of providing 911 service. So we're hoping that will actually reduce any subsidy that's needed.
Okay, great. Thank you. That clears it up. Last question, you talked about public and community education. Give us an idea of what that might look like.
So when it comes to billing, we're going to update our tariff rate as well as like an example of the billing. Most likely that'll be left behind. And I've got Battalion Chief Cruces, who's in charge of that effort with EMS MC of how do we get that word out to the public of you're now going to expect these bills from the city. So we're kind of aware of that. I think it's really this presentation, outreach at the time of call for service, and then using the internet, social media.
Yeah, definitely. And I would, BC Cruces, do you want to?
Anything?
You want to chime in?
Nah.
Nope. I anticipated that. And I would also think as my fellow council members are staging community meetings, doing any of our outreach, that would be a great thing to have you join us and include that. All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor McComo?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Chief Smith. And just a side note before I ask my question, I just have one question, but GIS works incredibly hard, and I'm sure they did on that map. So if somebody can send us the link or something, that would be great. I think you said this last week, but they were at our TSI PRC meeting earlier this month, and they presented, and they're just really incredible. If they ever had an opportunity to come to work session and present some of their innovative ideas, I think that would be wonderful. Chief, that was really great information. Thank you for the update. Whatever we can do to help get the word out, please let us know. Really, my only sort of startling point in your presentation, I wondered if you had information on it. Who does, for lack of a better word, oversight on like ambulance standards? Like who would have oversight over AMR, for example? The state? Like who sets the standards for service?
Mayor, Councilor McComo, the state has regulations under NMAC for both fire-based and EMS response, as well as the Public Regulation Commission. And then you're required to have medical control, medical oversight. So you have a physician who oversees your scope of practice, but there is a national standard as well, and then a state EMS bureau that sets the level of care you can provide.
Okay, well, I think this is a good service to our community, so I appreciate the work that you have put into this. And it was funny, I don't know if she's gonna say it, but I'm gonna say it for her, because in your graph of the times, she whispered to me, don't leave your house at Friday at 11, and I just thought that was really funny. Thank you.
And here's the map, as promised. So just as wonderful and amazing as we promised, it shows the call volume for county now. This is a 4-year period, a month at a time. So to do anything more detailed, like hour by hour, I think we'd be here until the next work session. And I think everybody wants a chance to go home once.
Wait, I'm sorry, Chief, can you explain once again what is happening? Thank you.
Every dot that you see on the map is a call for service in the 911 system. Each time it changes, that's all the calls in a given month. So it's month by month over almost a 4-year period. It's a lot of data, 100,000 something points that GIS helped us to log and illustrate here on this map. So it just kind of really shows that over the 4-year period, there's been a huge increase in service that happens. And as you see it over the 4-year, it's quite a lot. So I really wanted to illustrate that when we looked at this RFP and the services, we're looking at the county as a whole, and we're really partnering with Doña Ana County and their fire and emergency services to make this happen.
Okay.
Okay. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chief Smith, for your presentation. I have questions about, well, when you bill individuals, well, insurance companies pay for that, or not? Or when you bill, do you say, you know, your carrier may be able to help you out with this, or anything like that? Because I think if I received, one of my sons had to be transported, and when my then husband called for the ambulance, a bunch of, or the firefight, everybody this is Los Angeles, there was about 10 fire trucks, and they were all trying to bill. And I know that here we have AMR, and then we have our city, you. So what happens when, when there's all these responders, and what happens to, Joe Citizen, or Josie Citizen?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, thank you. So there's call for service, and if we respond, and it's an entire LCFD response, so our squad, which is an ambulance and one of our engines or trucks, they respond to the scene, they get patient information. We're going to gather identifiers that we can, as well as their insurance information, whether that's a private insurer or CMS, Medicare, Medicaid. And we will submit all of that once the report is complete to our billing company. They'll go through the report, they'll bill it out, they'll use that insurance information as well as hospital information, or contact the local hospital to get patient information so we can bill the insurance provider. So that's the first step, is to figure out if the insurance provider, what their portion is to pay. Anything that's residual, like you may have a copay or deductible, that gets billed out to the individual.
Okay. Now, so you indicated, I know that the negotiations or the presentation back in 2018 was contentious. And so the contract is coming up for renewal in 2024. And the renewal with Doña Ana County. So do you see any bumps in the road or anticipate any, any hesitance on the part of the county?
Councilor,
or hesitation?
No hesitation. I think with the county, we've definitely moved from trying to find each other and understand the different points of view to issuing this RFP together and being collaborative in our approach. So I don't think we're going to have any difficulties working on this with the county. We are working through the RFP process currently. AMR is currently confirmed to extend their contract all the way to the end of the year till January 1st when the new contract takes over.
And AMR contracts with the county?
They do currently.
Okay. But there is crossover sometimes, no?
There is.
Yes, because your dots go all the way down to Vado and Anthony probably. I think. So, so then what are the automatic aid agreements? That's prospective, correct, with the county, NMSU, and MESIA? Those are prospective?
Those are prospective. We're beginning to talk with the chiefs that represent the county, Chief Cherry, Chief for NMSU and Chief for MESIA, talk to them about what type of calls we could respond to on an automatic basis. So if it's for a CPR, if it's for a structure fire, that we could extend our services and assist those areas where it makes sense. So Oregon. Oregon is really isolated from most access from the rest of the county. Our Fire Station 5, 6, and future 9 will be closer to help render aid. So if they need help, rather than having to make this request and call people, it could be automatic through our computer-aided dispatch to send the units that are needed. So we're looking at trying to improve those relationships and go from a mutual aid agreement where we have to call and agree to where it's just written and adopted and it's an automatic aid.
So if you don't have the automatic aid agreement, then it sort of makes things harder to do. I mean, it adds more time to the response.
Councilor, that's correct. It adds more time. It slows down the process. There's a request, a permission. So it does slow it down where we could have it as part of the CAD system.
Great. Well, thank you again very much for your work. I think we wouldn't be able to survive without you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other comments? So, Chief, I have a few. Thank you for that presentation. Wouldn't this service replace AMR? Were we looking to replace AMR, or are you going to work together?
We're working at reissuing an RFP, so nobody was excluded, no companies were excluded from that process. So we're going to work with the top scoring bidder on negotiating. So. Okay, so I guess my question is, if the city wins the bid
I guess, the
Well,
fire department, or?
Mayor, to be clear, we're not putting in a bid for the services. It was contracted out because it's for the entire county. What we did as part of that RFP is we carved out a portion of the most critical call types that we want LCFD responding to only. So CPR, stroke, chest pain, very acute trauma where it's a level 1 highest priority trauma patient. We want a full LCFD response within the city, and that's what was placed in the RFP. Currently, under the mediation agreement, we are providing over 4,000 transports a year because those units are delayed. So we're waiting on scene for too long for AMR, or it's a life or limb situation, and we're providing transport right away.
Okay, so AMR could still possibly exist, both AMR and the city response?
Yes, any selected vendor in the future will coexist with city LCFD ambulance units.
Okay, the reason why I bring this up, a couple things. One, prior to Obamacare, the county has what they call an indigent fund, and it's about 1/16 of our gross receipts tax, because we're county residents too, goes into a fund. And these are old numbers, but I wrote them down a long time ago. It's about, back then it was 4.5 million that they collect annually. And I know they gave or give 1.3 million to AMR. So if the city's going to be picking up a good portion of their territory, I would think that they need to reimburse some of that to the city. That's just my take. They give $1 million to local providers, 1.3 to AMR, and I have here distributed statewide. So that's telling me that they're probably, if they still get the 3 times match, so if they can take money, they can get 3 times with Medicaid money. So that's, like I said, this was a while back when I wrote this down. So that's one thing. 2 is typically for volunteer firefighters, house insurance, your personal homeowner's policy, usually has a coverage of $500. And it was meant because some volunteer fire departments bill residents. The reason why I bring this up is if earlier you heard Councilor Flores ask, how will it be billed? I think if the bill comes from the Las Cruces Fire Department and if they live in the city and if they have it in their homeowner's policy, I mean, I think that's $500 that could be had from their home insurance, not their health insurance. That could be also, but this could be as a supplement, and to my knowledge, there'd be no deductible. So I just wanted to point these information out, that's all. But other than that, that's good.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so if there's nothing further, all right, well, thank you for the presentation, and entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Second.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Beta, second by Councilor Bencomo, that we adjourn. Teresa?
This is on a motion to adjourn the meeting. Councilor Abeyta?
Yes.
Councilor Graham?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councilor Coran?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Councilor Gondara? Absent?
Yeah, she left a long time ago.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 4:53 p.m. We are adjourned. Thank you.